to check in if, Chapin, if you're around, I just want to check in to see where you're at. I know you may have walked away for a moment before we start. All right, no worries. We'll just wait for him to return. Now, Rob, how is CCTV doing this? They're recording this session as we speak. And is it just even all of our banter and our various virtual backgrounds and all that?
Great question. So channel 17 is on as an attendee right now. So they are going to be streaming live. And I just pulled up their YouTube account or their YouTube profile. And it looks like they recently just started. So we're on channel 17 live right now on their YouTube page, tape delayed on their broadcast channel. I think it's usually a few days.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, so for all purposes, we're on right now. Chapin, you don't happen to be back yet for us to begin, are you?
He's unmuted.
Yeah, I feel like he might have stepped out of the room for a moment here, so let's give it another moment. I'm going to ping him. welcome, sir. Glad to have you. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's dive in. Are we good to start, Director Spencer, for our meeting?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Thank you. So a new one for this commission. We're holding our first remote meeting as such on Zoom, and here to conduct business according to the packet that has been sent out and posted onto our website. A few ground rules before we get into it here, just because we do have a new forum that I understand we will have the help of Rob Goulding to navigate any sort of public comments that may come in. So we'll look to you, Rob, for help on that front. We also are a little different from the council in that we welcome comments at the beginning of the entire meeting. And then we also ask for specific comments as they are available during each piece of the agenda. So we will try to entertain that as best we can. I ask for patience in case there are issues in allowing that. So want to be sure to put that out there so we all know. Us commissioners, we're kind of new at this as well. So it's probably just a matter of good protocol to mute yourself when you're not speaking so that we don't pick up on the dog barking in the background or the airplanes flying overhead or whatever it should be. So we'll have that, and we'll try to give reminders of unmuting. I found myself, my mute takes just a moment to unmute. So there's a slight pause there, but we'll work around that. Nothing we can't handle. And then as we get into discussions, again, this is the first time I'm doing this. So I think classically, we usually just raise our hand to say I'm interested in speaking. I'll try to be alert and see all of your little squares and say, oh, okay, so-and-so raised their hand. So please bear with me as well in that regard, and please speak out in case I happen to miss you in one of those chances. So we'll go along those lines for some loose ground rules into our meeting here. With that said, I don't think there's any others. I would just want to, before I move on from that, see if anyone else has ideas towards ground rules to make this a nice even playing field, to make it clear, and allow us to have a really good, fruitful meeting as well. All right, I think we covered it all then. Let us jump in, and one more note before I do this is that at the end of this meeting, we will have an executive session as has been informed, and this is regarding the city mandated evaluation of the director of the department as well as the city engineer. So we will do it in a similar format. Effectively, we will just stay on this call and continue our conversation, and everyone else bails out. Rob will be able to, he has a control functionality there to make sure that it's just us in the room, and plus we would actually see any attendees that might linger. So we'll look for everyone to clear out as if we walked into the back room at the DPW and began our conversation. So that's how that will work at the end. So all right, now with everything said, maybe we can move forward towards our agenda. First item is the agenda itself, and I'd like to defer to you, Director Spencer, for your ideas in order to accommodate staff on this. What were those ideas that you had?
Sure. It would be helpful if we switched item 7 and 8 so that the stormwater SRF item came later in the agenda, as Assistant Director Megan Moir and Bond Counsel Thomas Maloney can't attend until 8 p.m.
Okay, so switch 7 and 8. And that should allow enough time for them to be able to speak to that issue. Okay, so we'd be switching the SRF loans approvals of stormwater, pushing that a little bit later, and raising the Cambrian Rise North Ave piece to a little bit earlier. I think I remember from the packet that there were some parties interested in attending regarding the Cambrian piece. Is this fair to those parties by switching that?
My thought is that some of the conversations that we need to have on earlier items will go a little slower so that the expected start time of the Cambrian Rise item should still track. If we want, if we move quickly during the meeting, we can always jump to item 9 and reorder on the fly.
I see. Okay, true, because that is just staff. So, all right. Well, I'm sure that this commission can be reasonable enough to accommodate people's attendance and all. So Okay, great. So that is the proposal. To our fellow commissioners, your thoughts on the agenda?
Can I say motion to accept with amendments?
You can. And would you mind, we had ideas from the director, you mind, would it be just accepting staff's recommendations?
Yes,
Is that
I'm
what that would
sorry.
be?
Yes.
Okay, yep, thank you. All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Commissioner Hogan, saw your hand go up there, so thank you very much. Any discussion on the motion or further points about the commission? Commissioner Overby, please.
I'm going to have a couple questions or comments on some of the items on the consent agenda. I'm not going to be, I don't know if that's, are we going to be able to talk about those individually? I had conversations earlier already with Corey Mims about the paving on Archibald Street. And anyway, can I, even if we just do the consent agenda like this, able to have a comment during that and maybe make a suggestion at that point? Not that I'm going to pull it off and make it into a long,
Sure.
hairy discussion.
Yeah, so we will have an opportunity to discuss those. We as commissioners can speak to any one during our commissioner comments. We can speak to all three as we
Okay,
wish.
I
So we
just
do
want-
have some flexibility.
Procedurally, how that would work if I needed to pull off A just because of the conversation about that.
Okay.
But it sounds like we can make a comment and it's
Sure.
not an effective vote on it. There's no.
Yeah, so
Um,
maybe before we get into a motion stage there, we will certainly entertain some commissioner discussions around those pieces before we get to starting to vote on that.
All right, thank you.
Sure, thank you for the heads up. Okay, great. We have the motion to change the agenda, items 7 and 8, just flip-flop those. It's been seconded. Any other discussion on the agenda as it stands with that understanding? All right, seeing none. One other piece, I'm just going to pick on a protocol thing here. I may follow council's lead where I've seen that if there's a unanimous vote, we don't have to do roll call. But if there is any sort of dissent at all, that we would then do roll call. If I could defer to you, Director Spencer, your thoughts on that one?
If the vote is unanimous, you don't need to roll call. If there is a vote that has dissenting opinion, then you need to do a roll call.
Okay, so we can go that way and just do an aye. All right, great. Motion on the table is the agenda. Item 7 and 8 swapped. We have a second on that. We're going to a vote. All in favor of approving the agenda as such, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any opposed? Okay, great. So we have unanimous vote. Agenda passes. Thank you very much for bearing with us on those logistics. We are moving on to item 3, which is the public forum. And we will still try to honor our 3 minutes per person time limit, understanding any sort of technical abnormalities that may appear. So, Mr. Goulding, I'll look to you if you have anyone signed up for public comment to help facilitate that, not unlike we do with meetings in person.
Thank you, Chairman. We do have potentially maybe 2 members of the public who are signed in, and what I'd ask you to do, if you're a member of the public, is to use the raise your hand feature that we indicated on the agenda, and it's should be right if you hover over your name on the participant screen or on the toolbar on the bottom. You should see the ability to raise your hand. And I do see an Adam and a Peter. And curious if you wanted to speak, if you could raise your hand on Zoom. If for whatever reason you're experiencing any issues there, you can email me at rgoulding@burlingtonvt.gov if you're trying to get on for public forum.
And to confirm, Rob, it may be if you have those 2 to unmute them and just see if any of them have any comments in case they don't have email access.
Great. Adam, I'm going to unmute your phone right now if you have a public comment to give to the commission. You are now unmuted.
No public comment at this time, thanks.
And Peter, Peter SMIAR, I'm going to unmute your phone or your computer. You're now able to talk and give comment to the commission.
Hi, folks.
I'm just here to observe. I'm not here to, I don't anticipate making any public comment.
Okay. We did not mean to put you on the spot, so sorry for that.
That's okay. Thank you very much.
Sure thing. Great. Okay, it sounds like that's all you had lined up. Is that correct, Mr. Goulding?
Checking the participant list and checking the inbox that we published to collect any potential folks who are having concerns or expressing any interest in public comment. It looks like there are no other members of the public who are signed up or interested in speaking at this time.
Okay. I had, for my part, reached out to my local Front Porch Forum, just offered to introduce any comments that I may have received, knowing the strange format here and that perhaps not everybody has access to these tools or is comfortable navigating them as easily. So I wanted to honor the comments I got, and it was not many. So I'll just enter those into the public comment period. I had one comment from Kirsten Eastgrow, and I apologize if I did injustice to that name. It just says, I imagine the DPW has much bigger concerns, but as I predicted, all those ugly traffic calming containers that were set up around town by DPW and Local Motion are just crumbled garbage cans now. Most destroyed by snowplows, and none have plants or flowers in them now to beautify the streets. If the department or Mayor Weinberger is looking for work for his furloughed city employees, this may be a good day's worth of work to either remove or plant those street barriers. Thanks for your service. And Kirsten signs off at that point. There was just one other piece here, and it was, forgive my navigation. It was for discussion around, and I'm kind of summarizing, and I truly apologize because there's actually a lot to it, and I think I'll just paraphrase what I got here, which was around the mural and advocacy for removal of the mural with assistance from DPW. So there was a lot of language around motion there, which is partly why I'm trying to paraphrase instead of getting into a motion and things like that. So I wanted to enter that into the public record as pieces that I had heard from the public, folks who perhaps were unable to be with us here today. So that closes it for my part. And it sounds like we have no other public comments. Oh, I'm sorry, Christian Overby.
I was just going to say that, are you referring to the comment that was emailed to all of us by Luther Hume?
Correct, yes.
To the city council vote to actually take the mural down and store it by the end of September. The reason it was relevant, I guess, is that the Public Works Department has $40,000 possibly to contribute to this project. So
sure.
If people are interested in that, that was why she sent that information. She's communicated with me about that in the past. That's why.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it a little more clear why that was an issue, that Monday they decided that they were going to escalate the timeline to do that. And
so we're not here to have discussion on that piece. I just wanted to enter that in for public comment.
That's all I wanted to do too, is make sure that it was clear what that public comment was about.
Sure. Okay. And I do believe that there may be a comment later on by Director Spencer during his report. In fact, I have a lot of questions during that piece, so that may tend to take up a lot of time. So definitely appreciate you trying to give it some justice. And I know I don't do it justice at all, but I also don't want to get into language formality like that. So definitely wanted to acknowledge it. Okay. I will give a unique opportunity here. If anyone else has other public comments that they wish to enter, I know I did not afford you this opportunity earlier, but this could be a good time for that. All right. Seeing none, we will close item number 3 of public forum and move on to item 4, which is consent agenda. For anyone who may be watching this meeting, we have 3 items on the consent agenda. There's paving complete streets reporting, addition of speed limits section to Appendix C, and speed limit for Route 127 ramp approaching Manhattan Drive. These will be voted as a slate, so we either vote up or down on all 3 matters all at once. It's a way to consolidate some pieces that may be somewhat routine and try to move on to other deliberative items. With that said, I understand there was some discussion around some of these items, so it is open to commissioner communications on the consent agenda. So I will defer to our commissioners. Anyone interested in speaking on this item here? Commissioner Overby, please. And you're muted, by the way. Thank you.
I'm muted. I wasn't sure if Commissioner Moir was getting ready to say something since I spoken. I wanted to say that on the Complete Streets project form, I had a wonderful conversation with Corey Mims. I guess he's new in the Department of Public Works, and about this, and particularly the Archibald Street paving section. And I wanted to communicate that I'm a little concerned that there was sort of a representation that there's the cost is too much to meet the need or probable use of putting a sidewalk in. And I know that all of us that have been on the commission for many years, we have actually gone over this a few times, and Archibald Street is sort of a stepchild of getting a sidewalk, and it does have traffic. And I was trying to just communicate with Mr. Mims about that, and the fact that when we continue to say it's cost too much, or in his case, he explained to me very nicely that in fact they think they'll have to realign the whole road in order to do a sidewalk, which my concern is that we're consistently finding that it's too costly to put a sidewalk on Archibald, and in fact, it is a route from the Old North End over to UVM that I use daily, really, and other people use, and homeless people use, and so I just wanted people to acknowledge that it's rather disappointing that we every year say we're going to pave it, and it's great, it's looking better. I'm not saying we can't do what they're going to do, but I do really want to say that I'm concerned that we consistently do. And once we put this paving in, then probably we're going to ignore Archibald Street for another 5 years, because we'll always have a financial reason why it's not going to get a sidewalk. So that was why that was on that item. That was A of the consent agenda. And I also wanted to say on the 125 speed limit cutting back, I think that's a great idea. The other item which we have is to sort of start ramping down the speed to 35 before you get right to the end and have to drop from 50 to 25, which is it's an excellent idea. I think maybe there's one typo. I think they're meaning that it should be part of the 30% or /2 speed limit on listed streets portion, but that's a detail. So I did just want to mention the thing about the other thing I did want to mention is that the speed limits, actually. I think one of the things that this is great, segregating all of those places where the speed limits are set in odd places of, 25 here, 30 there, 5 on Church Street, things like that. It's a good idea, but it's also, it sort of is going to make it possible for us in the future to think about the fact that speed is really what makes it difficult for people to walk around and dangerous. So I'm happy to see that all those speed limits of various unusual speed limits under the standard 25 around the city are in one place, which is what we're doing with this consent agenda item. But I would like to further the discussion about maybe reducing the speed limits in a lot more places in the city in a consistent way, and not willy-nilly, one street here, one street there. So those are my comments on that. And I have to thank Corey Mims for having a really wonderful conversation. He's new, and I appreciated his listening to my rant about Archibald Street not getting a sidewalk, and I think it really should have. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Other commissioner comments on the consent agenda or questions? Okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion regarding consent agenda? Commissioner Barr.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Barr. Do we have a second? Commissioner
I second the
O'Neill.
motion.
Thank
All right.
you. Okay, great. We
Sorry,
have a motion.
Commissioner.
That was a close race. We might need a photo finish on that one. I think we can do it with the technology. Any discussion on the motion regarding the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move to a vote. All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Or raise hands,
Aye.
whichever.
Aye.
Okay, good.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Consent agenda passes unanimously. So thank you very much. Item number 5 is our next item, and this would be temporary parking rate suspension. And we may have a familiar name coming our way here. Mr. Padgett.
I'm muted. Where did my go here?
Sure, we could introduce like intro music for you as
All
well
right,
as a
there it is.
virtual background. There you go. Okay.
All right. And I'm not muted, right? You can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Awesome. So I am going to share my screen, I think. I can do it. I can do it here. All right. Excellent. I'm in. You guys can all see this memo, right? On the screen? Just want to be sure
Sorry,
the
yeah, I
public
muted
can see
you.
it.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, nice to see you guys. Fun to watch. So we are here today to talk about the parking rates in the parking garages because basically when COVID happened, all of our workers got sent home. And when all of our workers got sent home, we were not able to charge for parking because we can't have the gates down and have no one on site for staff, or to let people out if there's some sort of failure with the gate system. So we were unstaffed, and as a result of that, we couldn't charge for parking, and that by definition is a change of rates. And the only people that have the authority to change the rates in the garage, according to Appendix C, Section 19, is the Public Works Commission. So we're coming to you today to ask for you to this 2 paragraphs basically summarize that we're asking you to retroactively endorse the changing of the rates, to suspend rates starting on March 17th. I have a typo here. Starting on March 17th and continuing through today. And then in order to, so we want to get the garages open as soon as possible, but we also want to have a deadline out there so that if we can't open them, if the governor doesn't open up business enough, we want to have a deadline out there. And so we just put a deadline of October 1st. It's arbitrary. It means nothing. It could be September 1st or August 1st if you want it to be. We just didn't want it to be completely open-ended without having to come back to you. But basically what we want is the delegated authority for Chapin to readjust the rates from 0 back to their normal rates as soon as we possibly can, but at least no later than October 1st. And that's the gist of what this memo says. I did get into talking about how much this is costing. The garage operations generate about $200,000 a month. So every month that goes by, we're losing, due to COVID, not, the gates are up because of COVID. So this is not because we're choosing to put the gates up, we're forced to put the gates up. So this is a COVID loss. So, if we go all the way out to October, we're looking at $1 million, $1.2 million. Guesstimate, this is all changes every day. So anyway, so that's the gist of what we need. Happy to entertain any sort of different language with the motion. I have some other detail that I could show you about garage usage and the precipitous drop if you want to talk about that. But otherwise, I'd be happy to answer questions. It's a relatively, simple story from my perspective. We're giving away parking for free, and I'm not allowed to do that. You guys are allowed to do that, and we need your approval.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Padgett. And I apologize, my window of people shrunk a little bit. So if there's another representative to speak to this, Director Spencer, please feel free to tell me before I bring it into commissioner discussion. Is this time for a commissioner discussion?
Assistant Director Padgett, why don't you stop sharing your screen so that everybody can see more of the participants?
Thank you very much. These little foibles. Thank you for accommodating that. Okay, bringing it into commissioner discussion here. Any commissioners have questions for Mr. Padgett? Okay, I saw Commissioner Overby first. Let's go with you first, please.
I know Commissioner O'Neill hasn't spoken, so I should let her have her question. And then
Go for it. Just go for it.
Well, I did have an excellent conversation with Jeff about this question because I was concerned that it makes the memo has the appearance of this whole loss is due to the fact that the gates are up and we're not collecting. And we had a conversation actually about that and to try to clarify that. I had a big concern that we were just going to leave the gates open and not collect anything until October. And that it was implied that by voting on this, we are in effect endorsing the loss of up to $1.2 million of revenue to the city. And and that's not actually accurate. And Jeff just clarified that in fact, normally there would be 2,000 cars in that parking lot. There's been no more than 200, even with the gate open. So the loss is just, there's nobody shopping. And things are going to happen and maybe this, in the next few weeks. So things could change. But I had a concern about this being wide open and no collecting of revenue. And one of the concerns I had when I looked at the schedule on the back, it says where we've got people back to actually start monitoring and helping people with doing the automated gates. And I can see where there's just, it's a skeleton crew doing it, which right now is why this is being proposed. So I'm not going to say we're not going to vote against this, but I have a concern that if you were to read this on its face, anybody who was disgruntled about the city finances could conceivably interpret the way that this is saying. It says the suspension of these parking rates, which is the last paragraph on the memo, says the suspension of the gates and the suspension of all parking rates for the monthly parking and for the hourly parking will have significant impact on the garage budget. In fact, it's not really the suspension that's having the impact. It's the fact that we don't have anybody shopping. So I just wanted to make that clear. It's not like maybe we're going to modify the memo, but I just feel like it wasn't, it was alarming to me the way it read. And I particularly anticipating people who are going to find ways to blame various people about, finding ways to lose the city money when we're in this crisis with other financial things. So that's my comment about this that I wanted to contribute. And I appreciate that Jeff had actually spent at least a half hour with me trying to talk this through yesterday. And I think I get an understanding of it that hopefully I've just shared with you about it.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. Commissioner O'Neill, your turn.
Okay. I think there's some similarities in what Commissioner Overby said, in that I really want to make sure that we capture the language that due to COVID-19 and the stay home, stay safe restrictions from the state, these are impacting. So I really want to make sure that is super clear in there, for the history books, for, next year at this time when we're like, what's that blip from, that we really, or 2 years from now, whenever we're through this, just so that really reads more clearly. And again, I don't know, about editing it. So Director Spencer, maybe, you can jump in if you think that's
friendly.
if you think that's valid.
Well, the very first sentence in the memo says, due to COVID-19 emergency and the resulting stay-at-home, stay-safe order from the governor, the garage ambassadors maintenance crew were sent home. It's not exempt order.
Yeah, I wonder if we can reiterate that, kind of in that last paragraph, but that just I don't want to kind of beat that to death, but I don't know. I just want to make sure it's super clear in there.
I would suggest that potentially if Commissioner Overby and O'Neill wanted to have that message, that the motion could include the language in the memo with the addition that the motion was to move to approve due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the governor's restrictions for the governor's executive order around stay home, stay safe, and then have the rest of the language. And I think that would, for posterity's sake, be clear as to why the commission's taking that action.
I think that's what needs to be made clear, that it is in fact due to the lack of parking entirely, not due to the fact that the gates have been, we've decided to not try to collect any kind of revenue during this period of time. That in fact, it is not due to the suspension which is what the memo says, that the suspension will result in 500,000 to 1.2 million in lost revenue to the city. That's the problem. So if that makes sense.
Isn't it talking about the, I'm sorry, I don't really understand. I understand the concern about being blamed. I just don't understand how this memo gives that sense. I think it lays out pretty clearly what the grounds, like why we're in this particular circumstance. So are you asking that there is some language inserted about state orders? I'm just not sure what is unclear about this memo.
My proposal would be that the sentence that says the last paragraph, which currently says this suspension that we're voting on to accomplish no parking rates, no charges for parking for the rest until October.
Yep.
This suspension, this is what it said. The effect of our action of leaving the gates open until October is this suspension will have a significant impact on the garage budget. To provide some scale of this impact. So it goes on to basically talk about the dire consequences of our voting to suspend the rates for the summer. What I'm getting at is that is what I had suggested something like the fact that the parking utilization will be 1/10 of what it normally is. We are going to be potentially facing a loss of 500 to 1.2 million. That's basically what it is. And in fact, it's not related to close. We're not making any money leaving the gates closed. It's not, the cost benefit is not there. So I would be, does that make sense?
That's not, but we have to be clear that the reason why the gates went up had nothing to do with garage occupancy. It had to do with the fact that the workers were sent home. And we are not cleared yet to bring the workers back. The instant that we are cleared by the governor and the mayor to bring our employees back to work, those gates are going to go down. So how
about if that last sentence could be just worded just like I think Director Spencer was suggesting? That
it looks to me like the first sentence, the first paragraph actually talks about it, although it needs to say March 17th instead of March 25th. That it talks about, the COVID-19 emergency resulting stay home, stay safe order from the governor. The garage ambassadors and maintenance crews were sent home. Thus, the garages were lifted for free parking. Does that not say what we want it to say?
Well, I think maybe it's just that it's disconnected from, maybe I'm just not gluing the first part onto the second part, but the fact that it sounds like the suspension, it's just saying the lack of parking, maybe that's all you need to say. The lack of parking due to these staff being sent home and we can't allow parking is what will have a significant impact.
It's not the lack of parking, though.
Yeah, it's not the lack of parking. It's due to lack. I mean, if 1,000 people showed up to park tomorrow and the governor said I couldn't send my crew back,
they all
still don't make money.
Right.
But they all park.
But they all park.
Disallowance of parking by the governor will have significant impact on the garage budget.
Disallowance of parking.
No,
disallowance of employment.
Workers. It's the disallowance of the ambassadors to work.
We had a comment from Director Spencer. How about we just do an interjection here to hear your thoughts, Director Spencer?
Okay, here's my thought. To move us ahead, I would be uncomfortable to adjust a memo. The memo's from staff. It was put in the packet as a reference point. I think the commission's opportunity to put its thumbprint on the action is around the motion itself. So one particular motion would be that the commission moves, due to COVID-19 pandemic, the governor's stay home, stay safe order, and the lack of parking demand, moves to suspend and then goes through the language. And that way, the language that I think Commissioner Overby is reflecting would be in the motion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so Director Spencer, for clarity, that it sounds like that would be a piece that would just accommodate this motion, almost a standalone statement in recognition of that.
It would be embedded in the motion. That is part of the motion. There's an explanation as to why you're advancing the motion.
Okay. Okay. Almost like a signing order of sorts. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So checking in then, commissioners who have discussed this, would that be an amenable solution to the concerns at hand? Commissioner Overby, thank you.
Absolutely, that works for me. That was very well worded. Thank you.
Excellent. And the advantage of being remote here is you probably have that language in writing, don't you, Director Spencer? Okay. Excellent. Commissioner O'Neill, same thing. Would that, do you think that would?
Yeah. I just needed a little extra bit, just to reinforce the COVID bit. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, wonderful. All right, good. So we are headed in that direction, I believe, towards the motion. Before we get into that, if we could please, because we're not quite at that stage, any other commissioner thoughts or questions for Mr. Padgett? Okay, I just had a couple of brief questions, Jeff, if I could. Does any of this change the lease activity that we've been speaking about over prior months?
Yeah, this suspends the monthly and the transient parking rates.
Oh, so it's just suspended. It's not like we have to modify leases in order to
No,
make that effective. Okay.
no one has received an invoice since
Yeah.
April 1st was,
Sure.
there was no invoice April 1st, there was no invoice May 1st.
Okay. Okay, great. And do we have an idea yet on the impact the loss of revenues will have on the garage maintenance that we've kind of been eagerly pursuing over the past years?
Well, that's why I put those dollars in there, and that's why I did. I didn't make it intentionally scary, but I didn't make it intentionally not scary, because we have a fund balance of a couple $1 million, and this is going to eat into it significantly.
Yeah.
Which will at some point hamper maintenance activity. So capital improvement activities, I should say. Maintenance is not that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate your honesty.
It's going to be an issue at some point.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for that. Those are my only questions. So then at this time, we generally honor a public comment period, and I'll defer to you, Mr. Golding, if you have anyone in queue for speaking on this issue. I just want to check in with you first before we move back into commissioners.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners. There are some members of the public in the forum, and I'd like to just ask them if they're looking to speak during this public comment period to use the raise your hand feature that we indicated on the agenda. You'll find that on the lower toolbar on your screen. If you click participants, you should see the option to raise your hand. What I'm going to do is just unmute every member of the public's microphone, just to be sure we don't miss anybody. And as I do that, I'm checking the inbox that we published to collect public comments, and there is nothing in there. So as of now, members of the public should be free to speak, and it looks like you all are ready to speak now if you want to.
They all still look muted though.
Yeah, perhaps on each person's end. Okay. Well,
looks like Lee Terhune has unmuted herself if you are interested in speaking.
No, I don't want to speak. I just wanted you to know I'm here.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks.
Great. Well, I think that format of pressing the raise hand piece will indicate to us if there is a comment. So I think we'll look to that through the remainder of the meeting to cue us if there's a comment made. So we'll give every effort in that end. So seeing then no public comment towards this issue, we bring it back to the commission where, well, we've had some discussion, but we can see where a motion may lead us. So does anyone have further discussion or wish to just go in with a vote on this one?
I'll go with a motion to accept staff's recommendation with Director Spencer's addition.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Second, was that Commissioner Bose? Did I get that right? Okay, thank you very much. And just for clarity purposes, Director Spencer, would you mind helping out again once more with the language that you have?
Sure. Before folks vote, the language that I have is due to COVID-19 pandemic, the governor's stay home, stay safe order, and lack of parking demand, Commission moves to and then suspend the 1 and 2 paragraphs in your packet.
Okay.
Including the typo fix for March 17th versus the 25th.
Yes, we should change March 25th, 2020 to read March 17th, 2020 in that motion.
Yeah. Okay.
That was a bumpy week.
Understood. Okay, great. Thank you for recapping that. So the motion on the table is, as we just discussed. Any discussion on that motion from any commissioners? Commissioner Overby.
You might want to just make sure that people realize that we're saying that it's not going to be collected until October, but in fact that the fine print is that if in fact there is demand and things get worked and everything's back and the emergency's off, that it could happen sooner, that we would be able to resume more normal operations of the garage, so that it wouldn't have the same. We're not a blanket doing it until October. So that was my own comment.
Are you suggesting other language?
No. Oh, no,
point?
no.
Okay.
No, I'm just making it. It was part of our discussion. So for the general public that reads this, we are not blanket saying it's going to be free parking until October. So whoopee. We're saying it's because of this problem that we have, and in fact, we're waiting for the governor to act and other things to happen before we would actually begin charging for the parking. And it could happen before October.
Right. So it's just
and
October is the
wonderful
placeholder.
going back to work, and the businesses are able to get back on their feet. That would be wonderful.
Right. And that date is just a placeholder so that this is not open-ended into eternity. And of course, with the situation developing as it is, good chance we could be discussing this very thing in September again. So, okay, thank you very much. Other commissioner questions or discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, we will go to a vote. We will try the aye or raising hands, whichever works. All in favor, say aye or raise a hand.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
all opposed? Okay, it looks like we have unanimous ayes. And Commissioner Overby, I just want to check in because I'm not sure maybe you were muted with the aye, but you were good with passing that one?
Muted and unmuted and.
Okay, yeah, I know, it's
yes.
crazy.
I'll do
All right.
both.
But wanted to make sure we had unanimity here, so we got you. All right, thank you. So that motion passes then, it's unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, that closes item number 5 and moves us into item number 6, expanded sidewalk parklet proposal. And this was an item that was emailed slightly after the packet, but we should all have that as a separate PDF. And it looks like Mr. Baldwin and Ms. Losch will speak to this one. Greetings, good to see you both.
Great. I'm going to just kick it off briefly by acknowledging the hard work of staff to respond in real time to this state of emergency that we are working within. We are working on 3 components of what we're calling a restaurant and retail recovery initiative, looking to restart the local economy and help local businesses get back on their feet. So tonight we're going to talk about one of those initiatives that involves the commission, and in the coming days there will be other initiatives announced that do not directly engage with the commission's authorities.
Thank you, Director Spencer. I will provide just a little bit more detail on what we are recommending tonight. So we are bringing forward some recommendations that would allow basically grab and go parking to quickly be established for any businesses that may need more access for curbside pickup, since most businesses right now are still unable to open. There has been an increase in this curbside offering. And so we took a couple of approaches to identify some of these parking locations. We're recommending that loading zones be potentially opened up for this 15-minute grab and go parking between the hours of 4 and 9 p.m. Also taxi cab stands during those same hours, and also able to sign existing 15-minute parking spaces. Beyond those locations, we also have a recommendation to allow DPW staff to assign up to 20 additional spaces beyond those loading zones, taxi cab stands, or 15-minute spaces in case there are locations where none of those really line up with businesses that may need this sort of service. And so that's what the additional request relates to. It's just acknowledging that we aren't really sure yet which businesses will request this. And so we're just trying to have an option that provides the most flexibility for a quick response and a quick delivery. We also have Philip available, I believe, to address any specific questions for the regulations that are proposed here. And in terms of the approval process, Philip would be reviewing and potentially approving these, and these would only be changed upon request. So if we hear from a business that is interested in having this parking assigned, then Philip would review that and take that into consideration. So that's a quick overview of what we've highlighted in the memo, but Philip, if you'd like to add anything else, otherwise we'll take any questions you may have.
Actually, Nicole, I have just one more piece to add, and that is that we've been in close communications with the city attorney's office about these proposed changes, and it is past their review. So this is supported by the city attorney's office in terms of it being able to be done in the near term, as opposed to the standard practice of 21 days of published notice.
I think you're up, Philip.
I don't really have anything to add, I guess, other than we just need to be flexible, and we just want to be able to respond quickly to the needs of certain communities. There are restaurants in downtown core that are really close to taxi cab stands and loading zones, that this is going to work very well for them. And then there are other situations. I had folks from Sherpa Kitchen who actually asked me about this, and they're not anywhere near a taxi cab stand or a loading zone. And so we may have to do a quick analysis on what's going to work for those folks and be able to respond quickly to the needs of those businesses.
I would just offer one more piece, and that is that we understand and recognize that retail and restaurants aren't the single use in downtown, and we are trying to create the right balance between those interests and other interests. So it's a challenging circumstance for everybody, and we just want to make sure we find the right balance and have flexibility to do that.
And I guess it's also important to note that these regulations do have a sunset. They do have a finish in October. This isn't unlimited infinity powers for us. Right. This is not a blank check. Come October, this is when that will expire, unless we want to expand again if we need to.
Okay. I believe that's all the presentation. Please tell me if I'm wrong. Great. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's bring it into the commission at this point for questions or comments. So any commissioner questions or comments on this one? Commissioner Overby, please.
Am I understanding that this is from 4 to 9 p.m. in these temporary pickup locations right now?
Except for the 15-minute spaces. Those are the only ones that we did not recommend assigning a time of day restriction.
The ones that are already 15-minute site spots.
Correct.
Yeah. A separate question, were we talking a little bit about expanding the parklet concept as well, and more than the 10 that were, this isn't in here, but I sort of was expecting that to be part of this. How does that fit in with this?
Sure thing.
Go ahead,
Thank
Chief.
you. We did, in moving very quickly, we titled this agenda item about expanding the sidewalk area in the parklet program. Upon further review, the authorities lie really with the license committee and the city council for encumbrances of the public right-of-way. And so while we thought there may be a parklet related item that needed to come to the commission for your approval, this is another area that we're hoping to launch in the coming days, but it was determined when working with the city attorney that there was no commission action needed. So sorry for the confusing title, but that's why.
That's fine, that clarifies it.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. Other commissioner comments on this piece here? Okay. Oh, Commissioner O'Neill, thank you.
So you guys blipped out on me for a couple of minutes there. So I don't know if this was answered. I apologize. What's the outreach to restaurants and retailers about this project on the grab and go parking, whatever you call it? What's the word? about the changes in the curb access and the parking.
Yep. The temporary parking pickup zones.
Temporary parking pickup zones. Okay, thank you.
Rolls right off the tongue.
It sure does. I'm sure we're gonna. But yeah, so what's the outreach for the existing ones like the loading zones and taxi stands, as well as to the public, and then the outreach for those potential additional 20 spaces? Like, what's the process then for a retailer to say, oh, hey, we need one here?
I'll start off. We have a great partnership. In a crisis, new relationships and strong bonds are created across non-traditional entities. And out of this, there is a resource and recovery center that's been stood up by CEDO that has a very broad mailing list. There's also a business task force, a small business task force that has been advising the city on what they need to get restarted, and we would use that conduit to get the message out. The mayor also has 2 or 3 times a week a briefing on what the city is doing to respond to COVID that gets out broadly, and we'd be speaking at one of those briefings, and probably getting the word out with Front Porch Forum, and that's Rob's been fully engaged and helping out with this as well.
Okay, and then a follow-up. What about the temporary street closures? Did that, again, because you guys had blipped out, I didn't know if that was gone over as well.
So different parts of this project are advancing at different stages based on different department involvement. There's a pretty broad base of departments involved in this process. CEDO, City Arts, Public Works, the Church Street Marketplace, and we're now beginning to kind of pull in fire and police. And the police and fire, largely the police, permit street closures, and we're trying to have it all packaged as one program under the similar rules that they're followed in the past. So just to protect public safety, but we are trying to make it as streamlined as possible to make the process workable for businesses that are really struggling at this point.
Okay, and I think kind of moving forward with these different initiatives, this is our public infrastructure, and we are at this really unique moment in time that our public space is so valuable for economic activity, for exercise, for public health. I would love to find a way to capture my data commissioner, Commissioner Hogan, some kind of way to capture this information about what are the experiences that our retailers and our users and our residents are having with this shift in how we're using our infrastructure. I know that some of these things aren't rolled out, but it would be interesting to think how we can get that into into a rollout plan, just so we can measure what successes or challenges we faced as we roll these out. And I don't know where that lands, but maybe a separate conversation offline with Director Spencer about how we can implement some sort of feedback, whether it's with sales or feedback of residents when they're able to get close and just grab and go. I don't know.
Okay. I think Director Spencer, you're shaking your head yes to acknowledge that one. So it seems like that.
I certainly agree that there needs to be some sort of metric analysis here. And as we did with the Parklet program of having the QR code in a way for people to give us feedback, that I think was essential to understanding the success of that program, that we'd need to think about what to do here. And we've been mostly focused on standing these programs up. But once we get them stood up, I think we can have a conversation about how we're going to document their utilization.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. You know, segueing that way goes to my question, was to ask, well, recognizing the situation first off, and that would be granting you, the director, the power, I suppose you could say, to be flexible to grant these short-term parking spaces, presumably for people stopping to grab a meal or whatever it might be, and then dashing off and really not lingering, trying to keep with the rules. So my question relates to how conflicts may be handled in this particular situation. Normally, we as a commission might hear from one business, we might hear from the public and say, hey, you can't be giving that public space to a private business. And we might weigh the merits of the arguments and contemplate that. So I'm curious to know your own process there if we were to hand these powers over to you for these next few months.
Right. I appreciate that. At one level, we are looking to really expedite the process here and be as nimble as possible. That said, we understand that downtown in particular has high parking demand, and there are competing interests here. And while the outdoor seating in a couple parking spaces may benefit a restaurant, it may not be seen as a benefit to an adjacent office. So we have been working on how to limit the conflicts. One, by limiting what we're going to grant. On the temporary pickup zones, we're really talking about a couple dozen spaces in a downtown that has 1,000 on-street metered spots. So it's not like a significant portion of parking supply will be taken through this temporary grab and go pickup spaces. And as we look at the other types of uses, specifically the expanded sidewalk effort, there will need to be some expedited contact with adjacent businesses, just so they're aware and get any initial feedback before we finalize plans. But we really are looking to make this a much shorter and quicker process, not having to go to the license committee, the city council, and have a financial transaction that we can just quickly review, reach out to adjacent businesses, and grant approval.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. I think I'm inclined to grant these powers in these unique times, as we all know that businesses are especially struggling, and being the heart of the economy, right? We all want to support that. I think at the same time, it would be important for, as long as people had a recognition that there was some recourse. So I'm heartened to hear that you have a process in mind for handling situations like that. I don't know if we call them appeals or whatever it might be, but I think that would be an important piece to this.
And maybe to be clear, that's really around the expanded sidewalk component. For the temporary pickup zones, anything outside of 15-minute space is for a very limited time period between 4 and 9 p.m. So I think it's important to just recognize that most of the office hours that those spaces will still be made available.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I believe I might have been the last commissioner with questions, so I'll defer to you, Mr. Goulding, if there happen to be anyone raising their hands towards public forum on this particular issue, that this would be a good time to just check in on that.
At this time, there is nobody raising their hand. It looks like the same members of the public are in, so there's no one new, and the inbox is clear.
Great. Okay, thank you for that reality check. We'll bring it back to the commission. This item does request a vote in the end. So fellow commissioners, final thoughts, or want to just go to a vote? What you're thinking? Commissioner Overby?
I just have a quick question about the map that's labeled parking allocation with colored dots on it. What was that for in our packet?
So that was just a reference map. So that identifies all existing loading zones, taxi stands, and 15-minute parking spaces, just to give you context for where they're currently located.
Okay, I
Thank
think
you.
that was your last. Oh, thank you, Commissioner Harvey. Other questions, or is there a motion for this particular item from our fellow commissioners here?
Yeah, nobody's jumping. Motion to accept the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Barr. We look to you to
Second.
drive us forward. We have a second, Commissioner Gilman. Thank you.
Seconded.
All right. Any
It's almost like
discussion?
you guys are waiting for me now. Jeez.
We all have our jobs, Jim.
I know. Hey, can that go on my plate?
We'll give you a raise, Jim. We have a motion. It has been seconded by Commissioner Gilman. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do our thing. Make sure you're unmuted here as we vote. We can kind of do a hand raise or just an aye, but all in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, looks like this passes unanimously as well. So thank you for the work behind this, and really looking forward to hearing about the metrics and how this works in the next phase. So nice work, you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, that was item number 6. We have moved item 7 to actually be item 8. So we're going to talk about item 8 at this moment. If this is a good time to speak to that issue, Director Spencer.
I did just do the calculations by the time allocations we had on the agenda. We had identified the Cambrian Rise would come in 60 minutes after the start of the meeting. We are now 69 minutes into the meeting, so I think we're good to go.
That is impressive right there. Okay.
Let's hope my addition works.
I want your secret. Okay, so we'll move into that item. It's technically item 8, and just for the public's reminder, we did switch these items at the very beginning in our agenda process. So we are now speaking to the Cambrian Rise North Ave piece. Take it away. Uh-oh. If you're talking, Norm, you're muted.
Yeah.
It's the curse of us all, that little mute button. There he is.
Sorry about that. So the commission should have received a communication from myself regarding Cambrian Rise, briefing them on the project and our role and the commission's role in the future, near future. So Cambrian Rise, as you're aware, is a fairly large development project on North Avenue. And in the memo, I communicate all the mixes of uses, so on and so forth. Staff plays a role in the zoning process to review these projects, review them from the perspective of normally for traffic impact analysis and accommodation of the various modes and uses. In this case, it goes a little further beyond that, and that there is 3 streets that are going to be proposed to be dedicated and accepted within that development project itself. So there is a 3 segments of roadway that would be accepted by the city once this project is complete, and the developer seeks to dedicate that to the city. Along with that, there's also some proposed improvements along the frontage of North Avenue that really improves the various uses and modes along that corridor, which we have been working very closely with the developer to refine over the past year or so. All of these things are important to the commission in the respect that the commission has a role in terms of its adoption of these parking prohibitions and restrictions and management methods of management of those corridors, the new streets, and also the intersecting street on North Avenue. So we thought we should open the conversation to have you aware of this project and our respective roles and get feedback from you about the project itself. At some point, I believe the developer is going to be presenting to the commission a more detailed presentation of the project. But in the meantime, we thought we would open the conversation with the commission, and I have with me both Nicole and Laura Wheelock, who've been intimately involved with the project in providing comments, and they may want to add more detail to my comments. So I will look to them and see if they want to speak or add more.
Just the one thing that I don't know that you touched on is, the commission will also have to invoke the regulations around all of the intersections, one of which will be signalized, and then the other one, the one-way stop control, and then the ones inside the development.
Yeah, so that's a good opportunity to kind of explain the development review role. So one of the things that the department had done was, or I had done, was to review the signalization for the southernmost access point that connects into North Avenue. The analysis was looking at alternatives in terms of its method of control, for either signalization or a roundabout. There was an analysis that I completed last year for the development review process that looked at, could we do a 50-foot inner diameter roundabout? And unfortunately, with the constrained right-of-way dimensions and the capacity and volumes of capacity to be serviced, it just simply wouldn't work. And so the preferred alternative ended up being a traffic signal. So just so you're aware. And the memo I'm referring to is dated July 24th, 2018, that was submitted to the Planning Commission, or sorry, DRB. And I can go into further detail about that if you need, but.
We could probably hold off for that, see what kind of questions arise. Presenters, other highlights that you'd like to know, or shall we bring it into discussion? I'll defer to you, Norm, on that one.
Okay. If Nicole or Laura have nothing more else to add, then I think we're good. You can fire away with questions.
Okay, excellent. Commissioners, at this time, any questions, concerns on this project? I believe I read it correctly. There's no vote on this evening. This is more, correct me if I'm wrong, flipping around to the agenda. Yeah, no vote on this one, just for discussion piece in advance, and ultimately we would have a vote. So anyway, putting it back to commissioners, questions or comments on this project? Okay, Commissioner Overby.
I'm just going to register my disappointment of the news about the lack of the consideration of the roundabout at that southern entrance location. We've had there's been a long years of getting to this point, and it's sort of like my comment about the Archibald sidewalk. It's always too complicated to do something that's more expensive and complex, even though it might be a better solution. Sidewalk on Archibald, a roundabout, because there's going to be a huge amount of traffic coming in and out of that location, and because of the fact that that's a major route, and in fact people are going to be sitting there spewing exhaust. I'm very disappointed to hear that took place. Just want to register that comment, and I am shocked that we are just not able to show any leadership in making something like that be more taken care of when we could do that. Just takes the will to do it and pressure to do it, and we're giving up an opportunity. That's my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. I'm recognizing as I do this free-for-all thing that I usually call upon each commissioner and give you a chance to speak out. So this in itself is a little bit different as I adapt to this format. So I'll apologize ahead of time for breaking precedent and ask for forgiveness in case this free-for-all is okay. But want to give every opportunity for commissioners to participate as you see fit.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I speak on this point?
Oh, please do. Sure, Norm.
Yeah. Commissioner Overby mentioned. I want to be clear. We, as a department, really want to see a roundabout happen somewhere within the city, but it has to be appropriate to the conditions. And we looked very closely at this analysis to see if it could possibly happen. And unfortunately, because of the capacity and the throughput that's put into this intersection, the roundabout just simply would not work. And so in a very short order of it being installed, it would be in state of failure based on our analysis.
What are the biggest challenges to that, Norm, just out of curiosity?
It's just simply that if you have a limited constrained right of way, you would have to have a much larger diameter radius, inner circle radius, to make this work to the capacity volumes that we're talking about that's introduced.
And you're saying the space is just not there for that then?
Space is just not there to do that. Or the capacity to service that traffic is not there to do that.
Okay. For some reason, I recall perhaps at the early stages in 2018, you mentioning that there would have to be a traffic light. I just recall this, you mentioning this before, and I may be mistaken, but it seems like you had evaluated that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask my question, and maybe this will trigger others. There's talk about making some changes along the route of North Ave, and I'm curious because that's the side of North Ave that the bike lane stretches across. So how would that bike lane be impacted by the changes that are proposed here?
That's a great question. And I don't know, do we have any recent plans, team, that we can show? We have worked very hard to accommodate all modes here, and there is a proposal to add on-street parking onto North Avenue. And to make sure that it's accommodated safely, and working with Nicole's planning shop and the engineering shop that Norm and Laura involved in, we came to, I think, a very exciting solution of continuing the bike lane as an off-street facility going southbound, adjacent to the sidewalk. So it would be a dedicated facility that would come up off the roadway where the on-street parking exists. And then once the parking, on-street parking terminates, the bike lane would commence on-street again.
Wow. So that's news. So let me ask, that we've run into problems on North Ave with that bike lane where it just sort of magically ends. And then, we were saying, well, where do bikers go, right? It's right around the Scout and Company, I believe, right where that bike lane is. So are we talking about that dedicated facility running through that area as well?
No, the area of improvements are only tied to the redevelopment of the Cambrian Rise property. So the parking protected lane will be adjacent to the new parking that they're creating, and the expanded right of way allows us to do that.
Okay, so the lane might actually jog left or right, depending on your direction, and to get around whatever is occurring, and then go back into the street as we would expect it today. Okay.
I actually had a related, my question was related to that as well. In the memo, it outlines, or it sort of, it mentions the upgrades or the improvements significant improvements to North Avenue. So I was wondering if you could you already started to spell those out a little bit, as Commissioner Overby had mentioned before, and there's been lots of discussion in the past. When you mentioned trying to accommodate multiple modes in rethinking, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of these improvements. Thanks.
Some of the things that that the developer was really progressive in their perspective on trying to do something that would not only would benefit the project, but also to benefit the neighborhood, was to improve transit service. Obviously, one of their biggest points in this project is to find other modes to accommodate people and to reduce the burden of some of the parking that happens on site, and to connect people to downtown and other places without relying on a car. So there's a lot of those elements that play into this. The transit service is one, better accommodation of bikes and bike parking is another. And maybe really Nicole could probably speak to this better than me. So
if I could interject, so Cambrian Rise went to the city council on Monday, and they have presentation slides that were uploaded on Board Doc. If you guys are willing, I can share one of those that does show the North Ave intersection, the South Cambrian Way.
Sure, that'd be great.
While she's setting those up, the project includes a heated bus waiting area, 2 bus shelters, a bike path connection to the waterfront. So there's a lot here to like for multiple modes. So Laura and Nicole, do you want to give an overview?
Yeah, I don't know what this looks like on your guys' screen, so
that's great.
If you need me to move around, let me know.
Fancy.
Wow.
Laura, since you have this open, do you want to walk through and we can just chime in if there's anything else we want to highlight?
Yep. So, I apologize. This is an interesting view of it. This is the most recent. The only other plan view that I have doesn't reflect the changes that we've worked through with the developer for kind of the concept for North Ave. So right now you are looking west. This is the new entrance for the south side of Cambrian Way. The start of this road goes down to the two buildings that are recently under construction and opened. You can see the Liberty House, which is the old orphanage, kind of in the background for your orientation. North Ave, still looking at just 2-lane, one way each direction. This does show the new on-street parking that's being proposed on the west side. That still obviously needs both council approval for the curb line as well as your approval for location of parking. We have the bus pull-off area so that the bus would go out of lane to be able to accommodate what is anticipated to be a very large bus stop and heavy use. So the thought is that the pickup and the drop off would likely be more than just, the quick drop and go, so that it is out of lane to help keep service on North Ave. What I don't know that their slides show, sorry, is where this starts. And it's tough. It starts, their slides are out of picture, but essentially, this is the flipped view. You're now looking somewhat south. This is the South Road where we just were with that bus. This is where Cambrian Way would come around and come into the north with just a single stop controlled. This is where the bike facilities become separated and off roadway. They're now up on a curb on the green belt. Go back. So they are separated from the door by a 3-foot step off area, kind of similar to how St. Paul Street comes out, where you have the curb, a step off area, then you start the tree belt. But in this case, you're not going to start a tree belt, you're going to start a bike path or separated bike facility. You have I think it was a 6-foot green belt, and then the pedestrian facilities. And so one of the things that they're proposing is actually giving back portions of their property to make it public right away on the backside of the sidewalk. So the right of way within this area would also be widened. I think, Nicole, if you can speak to the kind of the conflict as everything merges together at the transit and maybe how it crosses the intersection, that would be helpful for me.
Sure. So the bike lane itself is shown in gray right
my
through
screen
here.
too if you wanted it.
Yeah, and I think, can you see as I'm drawing as well? So I just drew a little blue line here. So that is the bike lane as it approaches. Then they're using green conflict markings as it kind of merges into the transit lane. As Laura said, we have a bus pull-off area. The transit center itself is the first floor of the corner of this building, and so it's merging two existing southbound stops and putting them right at this location with the glass panels so that people could see out onto the street to see the buses approaching. And in that location, the bike lane shifts a bit. There is still some separation space between the curb itself where the bus will be and a little bit of space for pedestrians to queue. So hopefully they aren't encroaching into the bike lane itself. So that was a big design discussion that we had to work through, but I think we're pretty pleased with the compromise that we were able to come up with here.
And is this a partnership with GMT? I mean, I didn't realize that the sort of transit implications were this significant.
Yeah, go ahead, Chapin.
This is a developer who has really gone the extra mile to ensure a multimodal approach to the development. They are members of CAPMA. They are bringing a number of policies in place. They just, as part of the amended development agreement that the council approved on Monday night, the developer agreed to unbundle the cost of parking. So for any renter, if they don't bring a car, they will actually get a cheaper rent. And if they have multiple cars, they will have to pay more for rent. So this developer has made a number of commitments. And as Laura and Nicole were saying, this corner facility, Laura, if you could hover over the heated transit center right there in the corner, is a remarkable development that the city isn't paying for and the developer will be maintaining in support of a transit-friendly development. catty corner across this intersection will also be a shelter that the developer is paying to install. So there will be protection northbound and southbound for our transit users. Continuous bike lanes, and I think one of the other things to discuss is if you look down South Road, if Laura, you could highlight the shared use path, this will be a direct connection from the bike lane on North Avenue all the way down to the bike path on the waterfront. So it will start off as kind of a shared use path along the roadway, and then will end up as a dedicated shared use path on the park's property on the kind of sloped area of that parcel. Oh, great. Thank you very much. So this is a South Road here that you're looking at with a shared use path. And then the shared use path continues, hits a shared use path roundabout, and then goes down to the waterfront bike path. So there are multiple trails here, including a trail we might want to highlight off to the left. This is the 12 acres that the city will be retaining, and that there will be a natural path as well connecting North Avenue to the waterfront bike path, not going through the development. So there'll be two options, dedicated bikeways from North Avenue down to the bike path.
And while we're on this screen, it's probably worth noting that we are relocating the existing mid-block crosswalk near the gas station so that it aligns more closely with the parks path that comes through the city property. And so that's another relocation that the developer is paying for, and some upgrades that will be included with that.
Developer, I forgot also to mention that they are supporting car share and have supported a car share pod at this location as well.
Okay.
So we wanted to give this overview to you. In the future, we will be looking for you to basically take a couple of steps to authorize signalization of this new intersection at North Avenue and Cambrian Way. We will be looking for you to regulate the on-street parking both on North Avenue on the western side, and also the on-street parking on Cambrian Way itself, followed by that awesome pointer, thank you, Laura, on all three legs of Cambrian Way. We wanted to bring this to your attention before it got too far and before you had to make a decision. So any comments and concerns at this point, we can certainly hear and potentially work with the developer to address.
So Chapin, one more thing is what is awkward in this process is there's a process of dedication and acceptance where staff is reviewing these projects. And usually the process normally is that once it's dedicated and accepted, then we accept it as its plan is reviewed and approved by DRB. And though there are still interior issues to that project where the parking issues need to be adopted, stop control needs to be adopted at intersections, all these things that the commission has to at some point review and decide. So it's hard for us as staff to represent your interests in whole, and but certainly try to do that as best we can.
Thank you for that. Good to see the overview here as well. Very helpful to get an idea, because I think that was one of my questions as far as what are we looking at exactly here. So this is very helpful.
Yep. And again, this is on board docs. So if you guys need a link or a more direct link, I can certainly provide that to Holly or Rob for you guys to have.
Thank you. Okay. We were amid commissioner questions, thoughts on this particular piece here. So perhaps this new information may have introduced some other thoughts among the commissioners. So commissioners, any further questions or thoughts on this project now having seen a little bit more? Commissioner Hogan, please.
Hey there. Yeah, thank you for that overview. The graphics were super helpful to build my mental model here. A couple questions. Wondered if there's any consideration given to trying to float the bus stop there rather than creating a pull-off. And the reason I mention that is I've been at a stop down in South Burlington on Route 7 there, like a busy sort of peak rush hour time. And I've had a bus driver just not take the pullover and effectively set a pick for himself, his or herself, in the lane there. As he said, at rush hour, like I won't get, the driver told me, and I sort of asked about it when I got on, why didn't you go over? Why did you make me and my preschooler, like, you know, come out into the road to get onto the bus? He said, well, I wouldn't be able to get back into the lane otherwise. And my concern about that pull off there is that we're inconveniencing the bus with especially couple dozen people on it for the convenience of single occupancy vehicles behind it.
Yeah, if I'll take a first stab at answering this one. I was in some of the design meetings with GMT and the developers as we tried to coordinate the bike lane adjacent to the bus stop here. And this was actually GMT's preferred design. They requested a pull-off here. And so this was the design accommodation to meet their request.
Noted, thank you. And also add a plug, just mentioned that sort of the covered waiting area seems fantastic. I would throw in a plug to put up like a transit screen or something similar as a viewing, sort of a real-time display of like when the next bus is coming. Could really go a long way. I mean, that in that particular location and at several high volume, high visibility locations around towns. I think that's something that we all should be, you know, I think we should need to be tactful with in the financial climate at the moment. But you know, someday I'd love to see that stuff like on middle of Church Street, just in visible locations all over. But certainly nice cozy waiting areas such as that.
Thank you, Commissioner Hogan.
Raise
Oh,
that.
sorry.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other commissioners, further questions or comments? I might piggyback. But sorry, I'll just jump in and finish my questions, and I swear I'll catch you both here. One of my questions was seeing that we were looking to allow parking on North Ave, and I was admittedly a little bit surprised by that because it strikes me as there's so much land back there that almost asking, is there not enough land back there for enough parking for all the units, even despite the size? So I'll ask the question, you know, what's the main reason for looking at extending parking out onto the roadway?
I can take a start at that one. There's certainly enough land back there to provide parking for the uses within the development. They are looking to do some surface level activation for some of the businesses, and in one of the slides they do an up close of the transit center waiting area, and then they basically have like a restaurant or a retail in that location. It's also thought that there could be more of a pickup and a drop off type scenario for some of the residentials, so that people, you know, maybe aren't traveling through the entire development, but could do so right out in front, more on the northern side where the Liberty House is. And then on the south side of the South Cambrian Way, and I apologize for the name, we tried really hard and were voted down, is one of the senior housing for Cathedral Square. And they are already experiencing challenges with their turnover and the need for kind of the quick access, surface level spaces. So.
And I'll just add to that with a higher level piece too, which is, you know, I think as we've been approached with this design, you know, one of their intents is to try to build this as a very pedestrian oriented development. And having on-street parking on North Avenue does change the street character a bit and is more of a continuation of some of the old North End feel. And I think there was an interest in showing that street activation in a different way and encouraging the different uses, as Laura mentioned, with the retail space, the different types of residential housing that will be on site, that this just provides new opportunities for North Avenue itself.
And
Okay.
Don't forget the 311 North Ave, which is the city's property, which is where there's community gardens and future programming planned in what's called the Old Stone House. And so in a way, this is the developer's kind of help to the city, so that as the city's property is more fully used for the public, that there are some on-street options as well as some off-street options.
Okay, that's really good to know. Thank you for that perspective. It's great to not have to fill in the blanks myself. My last question, and I'll go back around, but given, what's the anticipated timeline for a vote on this, at least by us? And then when would they be looking at construction?
So prior to COVID, they were talking about coming to commissions and councils, somewhere around March, for a hope of moving to North Ave construction midsummer. That would start with, making sure that the curb lines were in the right spot. One of their DRB approvals is to have the signal up and operational within their phase 1 construction, so that the pedestrian mobility across North Ave can really be fully accessible and accommodate all the users that are inside of this complex as it starts to become occupied. With COVID, there's talks about still starting some of the North Ave streetscape work, curb line work, maybe in the fall. They still do have to go through council and we want to get commissioner support of their change to their line and grade proposals on North Ave. So we'll see how that unfolds, but possibly at earliest a fall construction.
And would that make construction linger through the winter, such that it's basically a construction zone through the cold months?
I would like to think that we won't let that happen.
Yeah, me too.
I think that it could look like they would start the signalized work or the signalization work to get the intersection again functioning, provide a high functioning crosswalk across North Ave to help, with their transit mobility and their mobility of their various occupants and tenants so far. The long linear project along North Ave probably is more realistically next summer.
Sure. Okay.
But we do need to get approval for the whole concept in order for them to do the signalized work, because they have to change some of the curbs that are out there currently for what we've asked of them.
Yeah, you don't want to commit resources without the commitment at the city level. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think I saw Commissioner Overby and kind of circle around to Commissioner O'Neill after that.
I was just wondering, there was a mention of parking on the 3 streets that were going to be expected to accept. Is that going to be parking on both sides of those little streets all the way around, or do you have any sense of that yet?
Yes. So do you want me to share again so you can see, or? Well,
I saw trees, but I didn't see parking. And I mentioned separately, so I was just curious what particularly because of the time frame, that it sounds like we were expected to have to get a lot of work done in order for some of the other things to happen. So I was wondering how much parking we're talking about here that we're going to be looking at.
Yep. So, and the idea with the parking is, again, to help with the street level amenities that they're providing, as well as some of the pickup and drop off situations. So starting out the south side here, it's not even an official block, but this first segment would look to have parking just on the south side, really to help with the pickup and drop off of the senior housing, as we kind of worked it out during the DRB process. As you move further west, we would look for parking on both sides, moving down into what would be a stop controlled intersection. As you turn the corner, this westernmost leg becomes more parking on, I thought it was supposed to be both sides, but some of the lines aren't there. And the lines aren't there because we asked them to not put them there per our typical street standards. But it would be parking on both sides. The western side of this is a curbless street, or where they were targeting to be a curbless street to help with their stormwater design. As we turn to the corner, this is where I recall that the parking is on a single side of the road on the north one, which those still have some lines scattered throughout, but it was, I thought, just a single side of the road. But
and what is the width of those streets? what are we going to end up with the area that's clear for the emergency services? When you have
They
the-
were 11-foot lanes, if I remember. Norm, do you?
Either 10 or
Well,
11.
you don't have. Maybe this
Yeah.
is premature. I mean, I know that I got a sense there's going to be a rush that we're going to have to deal with this. So I was hoping we had a little more information at this point to help.
Yeah, there's a lot of information through the DRB submissions, and those, because again, this is on a private parcel, and they are going to look to turn this over to us for free. So we are trying to do our due diligence in the review, and the DRB definitely leaned heavily on city department's opinions of what the proposed rights of way would look like during that process.
So you're saying because of their private streets, they're not going to have to follow the same like narrow streets rules that we have?
No, the intent is this development follows our standard of practice.
Okay, so we just
Yeah.
don't know yet the width of those streets when there's parking on both sides. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. If I remember, it's 2 11-foot lanes and the parking is 8 foot wide.
Two 11-foot lanes.
Is what I thought we pushed for, but on this one side with those single lane of parking, there might be a 10-foot lane.
Well, whatever.
It was a while ago.
I'm not
It's
asking.
been a
you
while
to
since we've
swear
really
on
looked
liable.
this
I'm
that
just-
closely.
I just
but-
was literally just trying to get a little bit better sense of what we're looking at here for the parking that we're going to be asked to approve.
Right.
Or ask to change. You know.
Yep.
We
Right,
have
just mention
directed
you have a
them.
piece. Yeah.
We've directed them to create a street that works for us, that we're prepared to accept. It will not be a narrow street. There will be at least 20 feet of clearance because it's a two-way street, minimum 10-foot travel lanes, fully accessible by the fire department. We've made sure that it meets our minimum standard.
All right. Great. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. I believe Commissioner O'Neill, you may have had a question in there. I just want to be sure to hop over to you.
Yep. I had I think just two. One is where does that bike lane end? Does it end at the end of the property right after that stone house? Was it Nicole who was talking about that?
Yeah, it is pretty close to that, where it transitions back from being a parking protected lane, shifts back down to just join the existing buffered bike lane that's on road now. And it is right around the Stonehouse property.
Okay. And then it ends a little further on. So our comment of, going skiing and being on the bunny hill, and all of a sudden you wind up bombing onto the expert trail. It could be a little harrowing. What are the projections of traffic on North Avenue coming out of Cambrian Rise? I mean, let's keep in mind that we have Burlington High School right upstream there with a whole bunch of new drivers and kids riding their bikes to and from school. So I can't help but have my parent hat on part-time here in thinking about concerns about how we control the traffic coming out of Cambrian Rise. So what are the projections that you've modeled on what that flow is going to look like?
So this is an interesting question because it went to the city council Monday to kind of get a change of the way that the different uses happen or could be allowed inside of their development agreement. It hasn't gone through DRB permitting or State Act 250 permitting yet, but they had a little bit of a shift. So I can kind of give you those approximate numbers. We received a memo from the developer in April of last year indicating about 500 trips in the PM peak that would come in and out of the development. Okay. And it's 450 in the AM. And these are the updated ones. This memo, I don't think it's ever been posted publicly. I think it's just been given to us as a draft, kind of as a pre-review for the council accepting the DA changes. Kind of a gut check. Do we feel like their proposed additional housing was acceptable, or was it going to throw everything off and we should take a harder look? So they did a lot of balancing of reducing office space to add affordable housing and senior housing. So about 500 trips. Nicole could speak to kind of how that plays into the North Ave corridor, but the North Ave corridor did have thoughts that this parcel could be more developed and had I thought played into the potential traffic.
Yeah, the corridor study itself, when we did that, we did anticipate, I want to say 10% growth in this section of the corridor, which was a very high estimate. And I don't think that even the numbers that Laura was referencing are close to that number. So it was very generous when we were looking out at future growth scenarios and potential impacts along the corridor.
Okay.
Yep. I will say, you know, as it relates to kind of your realm of oversight, the only thing that their traffic study with this many vehicles really kind of brought into question was the intersection of Washington, Berry, and North Ave. Their initial traffic studies indicated that that intersection was going to start to perform poorly based on its geometry, configuration, and service to pedestrians. It was borderline. It could have gone to be a signal, or it could be something else. DPW had requested that, you know, to be more in line with the corridor's recommendations that we perform intersection improvements to enhance and calm cars to be able to kind of make that perform better. And that project is actually in design, and if COVID hadn't existed, probably would have gone for construction this summer, but would go for construction next summer. So that's going to be a raised intersection, better pedestrian accommodations, lighting and whatnot to be able to kind of pair with this development's traffic or anticipated traffic.
The developer's impact fee is going to pay for about half of that improvement.
Yep, and a state grant pays for just about the rest of it.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Commissioner O'Neill.
So just a follow up then, but there was no kind of exploration of sort of any backflow of traffic North Avenue North. Like I'm just thinking of that horrible intersection at Institute Road, and your modeling indicates, at least now, that there won't be kind of any clubs that way.
Right. I'll let Laura add on to this if there's anything more specific for this development review process. But again, the corridor study, when we looked at 10% growth northbound, still showed those intersections operating at acceptable levels. That corridor study, I will acknowledge, had some recommendations to improve those intersections, but they can handle the additional traffic coming out of this development.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, they did do levels of service both for the Institute Road signal as well as the 127 signal. And I think actually they even went up to the shopping center for how far north they looked. And actually their traffic goes as far south as the Champlain Parkway, and they get to pay state impact fees. So.
All right. I guess as long as the, high school and the bike lanes don't get thrown under the bus for any congestion because of Cambrian. Okay. I think we'll certainly look to you folks on, the advice on the signaling, getting traffic onto the street when that time comes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Other commissioner comments before we go to public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll defer to Mr. Golding here again for some deference to welcome public comments on this particular agenda item.
Thank you, Chairman. At this time, there is nobody signed up under Zoom or in the inbox that we published to receive potential public comments.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for checking that. In that case, there is no vote, so there's no action for this commission to take. So thank you for the presentation. Really helpful to have some advance notice on what might be coming down the pike. And ultimately, you would have had these questions anyway, so may as well vet them out and put them in the air now rather than at a point that makes things a little uncomfortable. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you for the time.
You're welcome. Okay, so that closes item number 8. We're moving to item 7 per our agenda switch from earlier, which is loans for a stormwater collection system. And good, we bought ourselves enough time to have Megan join us. Great.
So we have Division Director Megan Moir, and we also have our bond counsel, Thomas Maloney, who you heard from at the last meeting, maybe didn't see, and we're here to answer your questions. So Megan, take it away.
Hi, Commissioners. Thanks again for the adjustment on the schedule to accommodate the loveliness that is working and trying to manage kids. So when we came to you, I believe in March, for some approvals around drinking water loans as well as wastewater loans, we indicated that we would be bringing a separate item forward for the stormwater collection system. And so today, we bring that item forward and create a general bond resolution for stormwater borrowing into the future. And I know that Commissioner Overby had a number of questions regarding how the sort of order of operations of that, which Mr. Maloney can certainly address. Ultimately, this project will line approximately 5 miles of our highest risk stormwater pipe. A lot of our stormwater pipe was, even though it is younger, the material that was used was galvanized metal, and that has quickly rotted away since sort of the 1980s due to all of the application of salt that we do on our roads to keep people safe. So a little bit of conflict of needs there. And the overall amount that we are projecting to borrow, it's an up to amount, would be $2.56 million. And that is part of our original $30 million Clean Water Resiliency Plan voter authorization. So that's sort of the overview of the project. I did provide, having learned a lesson from last time, did provide some estimates of financial impact, the different borrowing costs and so on and so forth. We are planning on advancing this through the SRF, the State Revolving Fund loan program, which has very low interest rates. And as we've discussed in the past, has the benefit of you don't start paying debt service until 1 year after the completion of the project. And in a time like COVID, really it's what's going to enable us to do the work, because right now the revenue is a little challenging, though we do have a plan for how we can get our revenue back on track to be able to pay the debt service that would hit in FY22. And with that, I don't know if it would be helpful to just go to questions, or to have Thomas Maloney just provide a little bit of an overview of how these general bond resolutions go and the role of the DPW Commission. It's very much up to you.
Sure. Well, in honor of Mr. Maloney's presence, especially since he appears to be on a boat out in Lake Champlain right now, check in with you to see if you have any highlights that you wish to offer to us.
Yes, I'm on my boat at Perkins Pier.
No waves at all. You're very steady. It's amazing.
Thank you very much. Nice to be with you all this evening. So what was presented is a new general bond resolution for providing of financing for the issuance of stormwater bonds. And as with the wastewater system and the water system, these general bond resolutions have a pledge of all net revenues from the separate enterprise funds. Net revenues being all of the fees and revenues that the city collects from the operation of these systems after payment of operating expenses. Operating expenses are all your costs of providing the services to the residents and businesses within the city confines. So what we used is the template was the water system bond resolution, which was originally adopted by the Board of Public Works Commissioners in April of 2017, and then adopted in May of 2017 by the City Council. We have this interplay between the Department of Public Works and the City Council. And in general, the City Council is the entity, the governmental body that's responsible for all debt issuances. And yet we have the Department of Public Works and the delegation to the Director of Public Works for actually operating and managing the systems. So it is our general view that while the city council authorizes the incurrence of debt and the financing terms, and ultimately the body that sets the rates for collection of revenues, as well as has the authority under its ordinance and its charter to file liens against property owners who don't pay their assessments for water, wastewater, or stormwater charges. There is a level of responsibility and management of the system that is where the Department of Public Works and you as Board of Public Works Commissioners have oversight responsibility. So as we did on the water system, we come to you with proposed resolutions, want to ensure that you appreciate and understand the responsibility primarily on the management side of the system. And so we've presented the draft of the public, we have two resolutions. One is really the resolution of the Department of Public Works adopting and approving a stormwater general bond resolution. And under this, the authorization with the voter approval, as Ms. Moir has indicated, that the voters approved a significant bond issue for wastewater and stormwater capital improvements. It provides for a pledge of all the net revenues from the operation of the stormwater system, and is going to be the security for the issuance of debt obligations to finance the capital improvements for the stormwater system. We have, and I understand Commissioner Overby had a question of why does the Public Works Department go first versus the City Council? City Council through the City Attorney has indicated, that's their preference. They want to make sure that the Public Works Commissioners are supportive of this. And then ultimately the City Council, as the governmental entity responsible for debt issuances, will need to then approve the actual financing terms. The proposed stormwater bond resolution is very similar to the water bond resolution. A couple of significant changes is one, we've added an allowance that a lot of the process, the mechanisms in terms of certifications from outside consulting engineers will not be required if the financing is a straight loan through the State of Vermont Environmental Revolving Loan Fund. And that's essentially what's contemplated here. At the same time, these general bond resolutions are drafted in a way that they're going to live for a significant period of time. And so that in the future, as the city needs additional funds to support its stormwater collection and management system for the protection of Lake Champlain and the health and safety of the citizens of not only Burlington, but the state of Vermont, that you may in the future need to issue additional debt. And so these general bond resolutions are drafted in a way to provide for that, so that you have a mechanism by which additional bonds can be issued in the future. So what's being presented is a resolution for the Department of Public Works Board of Commissioners to say, yes, we want to issue these bonds payable solely from the net revenues of the stormwater system. And we'd like the City Council, as the entity and the authority responsible for debt issuances, that has the charter authority as being the one that needs to approve debt issuances, we'd like them to authorize this so that we, as the Department of Public Works, can fulfill our responsibilities and our duties and our challenges of implementing improvements to our stormwater management system. So, very similar to the, as I said, to the water system bond resolution that this Board of Public Works Commissioners adopted in 2017. A few changes that were provided, made because it's contemplated that at least in the early stages, your financing source will not be bonds issued through the public bond market, but rather because the state of Vermont has funds and a willingness to support these projects, that the debt will be incurred through the state of Vermont Environmental Revolving Loan Fund. But either way, this is designed to provide for that debt issuance payable from their net revenues of the stormwater system.
Thank you very much. And we're noticing your audio kind of goes just a little bit in and out. So I think we heard everything you said. Just giving a little bit of a heads up there. It's probably the sailing that you're encountering. The winds are blowing in. Thank you for that, both of you. So bringing this into the commission, and if I may, I know Commissioner Overby, you had a list of questions, and I'll just see if we had other questions first, and I'd like to defer to you at the end, knowing that you do have some significant questions coming up. So do other commissioners at this time have questions around this particular item? Okay. In that case, I'm happy to grant you the floor, Commissioner Overby, to go through your questions that you have.
Actually, I received from Mr. Maloney the answers to some of the questions that I had, and I was wondering how would I share this with the rest of you in case it was relevant to information that you might want. Procedurally, how does that work?
We could certainly we could do a screen share and go through them one by one. We are happy to send them out to folks afterwards, although I understand that would be after your vote.
Yeah. I just didn't know procedurally what to do, and maybe I should have done it differently before so that other people were aware of the questions that I had. I think a lot of them have been addressed in the explanation that was made, although I had, so I don't know whether I don't really need to probably go through each individual question. Okay. My original question originally was why it is that we are now, 2 months ago, we were actually being asked to just do a resolution that relates to specific water and wastewater bonds. And this is actually a different thing, the general bond resolution, which is flipping the way that it happened before. And I understand the explanation was, did I hear you right, that in fact, the Public Works Commission in 2017 actually did do a general bond resolution for water and wastewater? Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct, Commissioner.
For water. Oh, for water.
So on the water system, so April 17th, I believe, is the date of 2017 is the date that this board, your board, adopted the bond resolution for the water system bonds. That was pursuant to the voter authorization for approximately a little over $8 million of water system revenue bonds. I appreciate that in March of this year, we came to the Board of Public Works Commissioners, and at my suggestion, because there were some concerns of board members, that we modified the resolution to indicate that if the bonds were to be issued through a public bond offering, separate and apart from the Vermont Environmental Revolving Loan Fund, that the question would have to come back to the Board of Public Works Commissioners. City Attorney indicated that was not their preference. They appreciated that, we took that action, but their preference, because the City Council is ultimately the authority to approve and authorize indebtedness, the directive for me as bond counsel is the preference is to have the Public Works Commission approve this. And again, without understating the importance of your role as commissioners for the oversight of a very important and significant department of the city. The ultimate authority for debt issuance resides with the City Council, and the preference is to have the Public Works Commissioner say, yes, this debt incurrence is appropriate and supportive of our mission, and that then the City Council then has the final determination to say, yes, okay, we will authorize the issuance of X dollars worth of bonds, with the recognition that they need to set rates and revenues sufficient to pay that indebtedness, because it's ultimately, backed by the credit and the credit standing of the city's enterprise fund, primarily in this case, the Stormwater Enterprise Fund.
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. I don't know if your mic, something is, maybe a battery is starting to give out or something. It's starting to break up, but I think my question is my confusion, and I'm just trying to get clarification of this because it was sort of different in March. There seems to be a general bond resolution that exists in a general way about stormwater bonding, and then you have individual resolutions specific to like what we did this March, that is like a specific amount of money that we're saying we are recommending that the city council approve bonding this way, and we're going to set rates to appropriately pay for that. But what this is sort of what my question really related to is the general guidance, and the general bond resolution is a general thing, not the specific thing to our specifically saying, yeah, we're willing to do rates for this particular amount of bonding. So I just don't understand why it is that now the Public Works Commission is being asked to be the body that generally approves just any stormwater bonding for stormwater maintenance, and in addition to the specific amount like what we're doing, which is the 2.6 million. I guess that's my confusion, and maybe it's not an important distinction, but it does seem important, particularly because I don't think any of us are experts at these kind of documents, and I have a concern that I'm going to just give a vote for something that I really don't completely understand due to my not having expertise in bond financing, particularly relating to the other questions that I had that I included. So maybe am I, you see what I'm getting at?
I appreciate the comments. I certainly appreciate the concern, the ultimate responsibility, and I don't mean to suggest that this is and shirking of any responsibility, but the ultimate responsibility resides with the city council, because they're the governing body that has under the city charter is the entity and the governing body responsible for any incurrence of indebtedness. The reason why I have always liked to, on these items of presenting this to the Board of Public Works Commissioners, is there are obligations for that the Department of Public Works needs to operate its particular systems, its divisions, in accordance with prudent engineering practices. Make sure that there's insurance in place, make sure it's being managed properly. But ultimately, the responsibility for the repayment of the debt and setting of the rates and making sure that there's revenues and reserve funds, the financial aspects of this that go to this, are part of the city's financial statements, ultimately resides with the city council. And so it's a, there's a balance where the city council delegates to the Public Works Department responsibility for making sure that the system is operated in a prudent manner, and yet the debt and financial aspects of the system still reside with the city council. And as I indicated earlier, the March one was an anomaly, and perhaps maybe that's the measure of the times, but the prior practice was the city council acts after the Public Works Department is active. And so your point is also a good one. Let me not, make sure I address it as well. Is yes, we have one overriding general bond resolution expected to last for for many years. As an example, where for the electric department, their original bond resolution was adopted in 1981, and they've incurred additional series of bonds under that since that time. The concept of the general bond resolution is to say we will pledge our net revenues from our stormwater system in this case, and we have the authority to issue bonds from time to time in series as long as we have the wherewithal to make sure that those bonds are paid. And every bondholder has equal rights, so we don't need to get consents or waivers or modifications. Every bondholder in the future gets the same package of rights and benefits as any other bondholder, and it makes for a more efficient and effective debt and financing process. And these are very commonplace. That I don't think there's anything particularly unusual in the stormwater bond resolution that I have drafted, and it is designed that although the initial financing is expected to be through the state revolving loan fund, this provides the city with flexibility that if in 5-year time you need a significant amount of money for additional stormwater collection and management systems, you have the wherewithal to do that with the work that's being done today in laying the groundwork with the general bond resolution.
So yeah, so what the challenge that I have related to this is, are you then, despite the fact we're advising that the city council will accept this language the way it is, and we're advising them that we understand it and we endorse all the elements to the proposed general bond resolution, which could last for, like you said, for 20-40 years of stormwater borrowing. I guess that's where I'm at with this. You're advising us as a commissioner, me as a commissioner, that this is that we should recommend this language to the city council, and and I might not understand parts of it, but I'm advising them that they should accept this as the way things will operate, and these are the terms.
So, Commissioner Overby, maybe if I could speak to that, because it sounds like I only want to speak because I think I share some of the concern in the sense that these are tough ones to understand, right? For those of us who just have full-time jobs, and really hard. How can we possibly make a financial recommendation like this? And from my own decision standpoint, just to make a confession that I'm probably not looking through the particulars of the finances as much as the characters involved and the projects involved. I know Megan, I feel like, pretty well over the years, and I trust Megan. I know Chapin and trust his decisions as well. So, as well as the mayor, right? I think he's been a pretty good steward for the city. So this is just me. I'm not speaking for anybody here, but when it comes to me, I look at the characters and think, all right, they all seem to line up. I understand where this money's going, and then I pass that along in good faith that all the particulars of the finances are going to work out. At the same time, I recognize cities have gotten sunk by rogue characters who have overspent and taken on huge debt, right? So that's where I think this oversight role that we play is still important. That maybe some of us are uncomfortable with the financial aspects, but we can still rein that in if we do happen to see those rogue characters or something that, even if our gut just doesn't feel right for something strange. So that's my response to you, to just show a little bit of solidarity that I think I'm with you in many respects on this front here. And perhaps I'll never have all my financial questions answered, but I personally trust the characters involved as well as my fellow commissioners.
And Commissioner Overby, I mean, because I also, running through it, don't know absolutely everything in all of the legalese, I do a cross-reference with our other existing general bond resolutions to see that There's no surprises, there's no big changes, I think, to Mr. Maloney's point. So it is very much in line with existing general bond resolutions. The one difference which I had highlighted in the document was that one of the requirements is actually a little bit less than for the water and the wastewater system as far as the debt coverage ratio that we need to meet. And that was really the only substantive change in the whole document that I could find. So I don't know if that means anything. Doesn't mean that all the other ones that we had were potentially perfect, but they are drafted by legal staff and reviewed by our city attorney and whatnot. So
I totally support the people involved, so I totally agree with you, Chairman Oceanville. Absolutely. Assistant Director Moir is just excellent. And everybody that I've been involved with Department of Public Works are excellent. I think my reason for these questions has to do with the discomfort that I've seen. I'm aware of it. The community is not very familiar with municipal finance and budgets and how much borrowing takes place and how people's taxes are spent. I mean, there's a lot of ignorance in the community about these things, and most people are saying, well, the lawyers know what they're doing, and so they just sort of pass it along. Well, it's just fine. I don't understand it, and I haven't, in a separate text, been trying to help educate people about financial literacy. So this is where I'm coming from, not in the consent, not due to a particular concern that somebody is going to be corrupt. My concern is that I don't understand, and I don't think it's appropriate for me as a person with a responsibility on this commission to just say, oh, well, it's too complicated. Somebody else has figured it out. And particularly when, for example, one of the questions I had was, why is it that there's a clause in here that says that the actual trustee who's managing this money, in effect, who's getting supervising the payment of the interest and the principal on these bonds, they're able to buy these bonds themselves and do other financial deals with the city. And to me, it's sort of it sort of doesn't sound right, because it feels like potential conflict of potential for self-dealing. Now, I'm not saying that's what that clause is there to promote. I'm just saying, on its face, if you read it, that doesn't feel right as a lay person to say it's fine. Somebody's managing our bond operations, and they're able to actually buy bonds too and do their own dealing with them. That just didn't feel right to me. And or why can any Vermont bond trust company participate in managing this? Can they be the trustee? And the answer is no. They're too small. There's nobody. So anyway, I'm going to make sure you get these questions. I'm not going to vote against this. I just clearly feel like we all are very, very easily walk away from our responsibility to ask questions about things that we don't understand that are financial for the community of the city of Burlington. And we're facing, as we all know, significant financial challenges. And I cannot, in good conscience, not ask questions about this and feel like I can't just rubber stamp it. So I feel like it's important that we all think about it. I appreciate the answers that have been given to me. I want people to question what they know, and when they're willing to just pass it on and say, yeah, oh, I guess somebody else knows better. They're very smart. I'm going to just say yes, because that's how Newport happened. That's how, unfortunately, the Burlington Town Center debacle happened. That's how things happen. Everybody else assumes somebody else knows what they're doing, and they take the word of somebody else as a friend of theirs, or it just doesn't work. So thank you. I totally appreciate your detailed explanations, Mr. Maloney. I absolutely appreciate that. You've always been great about explaining this to us, and I appreciate it. And that's why I wanted you to understand that background of why I don't feel like I can just say, oh yeah, I don't understand it, I'm walking away from it. So thank you for humoring me about this. It's important that we all care about it and take opportunities to understand it. And I still don't understand it, a lot of it. And I'm going to continue to ask these questions, and I'm going to hope that I'm not having a meeting in a year where somebody's going to point out, well, you voted for this. What were you thinking? Or 10 years from now, you voted for this. What were you thinking? You got us into big trouble. So that's the end of my rant. Thank you so much.
If I may, I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the comments, and I appreciate the seriousness within which every commissioner approaches this. And so I will say, when the voters of Burlington by, I think it was about 70%, if I'm not mistaken, overwhelmingly supported the issuance of revenue bonds for the Clean Water Resiliency Program, which was a combination of stormwater and wastewater system improvements.
92%.
That this is important. This bond resolution, I think, is a fair and reasonable and customary method to provide for the financing and the incurrence of debt payable only from revenues from these particular enterprise funds in order to implement the projects that were presented to the voters when they approved the clean water resiliency projects. So from that end, the real question is, does the Stormwater Enterprise Fund have sufficient mechanisms and revenues to be collected from the stormwater user fees to be able to pay, let's call it $3 million or up to $3 million of bonded indebtedness over a period of time at the rates that at this point the state environmental revolving loan fund charges, or is as you project your revenues and your stormwater fees, are these projects so critical and important to the mission of this board and the Department of Public Works that if and when necessary, if you have to increase these stormwater user fees, that it's fair and reasonable to have the people who are generating stormwater pay their fair share of your costs of management and protection of our lake and ultimately our drinking water. And so from that end, if the view is these projects are important, the voters have authorized it. We need to, the mechanism by which we finance these projects are basically a pay-as-you-go from user fees from the people who are ultimately going to be, paying for these improvements through the stormwater user fee assessments. Is that going to be sufficient to pay off the capital costs, borrowing costs, and interest to be able to provide these improvements? Ms. Moir has definitely done her homework on that, and I think provides that support. Those are critical questions that the City Council asks, critical questions that the Chief Administrative Officer Shad, as well as Director of Financial Operations Goodwin, ask. And so from that perspective, I think this is a fair, balanced, and the correct approach to be able to finance these improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Okay, we were into Commissioner communications on this item here for any questions. I believe Commissioner Overby had the lion's share, and I want to recognize that these are good questions, Commissioner Overby. So thank you as part of the commission for bringing them up. In honor of our schedule here, we generally go to public comment. So Mr. Goulding, if you're out there, just checking in to see if there are any eager hands raised to pitch in on this topic.
Thank you. At this time, there are no hands raised on Zoom, and there are no emails in the inbox.
Okay, great. This commission is expected to vote on this particular item, so I will look to my fellow commissioners at this time to potentially move this forward. Or not. Commissioner Barr, There you go.
Unmuted, I'll make a motion to accept staff's recommendation.
Great. Thank you. We have a motion. Commissioner Galen?
Second that motion.
Seconded. Thank you. Motion on the table to accept staff's recommendation. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, great. Seeing none, let's go to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, looks like that passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Megan, Mr. Maloney, for your time. Super valuable discussion this evening on this bond issue, so appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you.
That closes item number
guys so much.
7. Thank you. I like your new background, by the way.
Well,
Don't
the
get
light,
lost up in
the
the mountains.
light from the basement was starting to annoy me, and I thought it was annoying you guys. So I thought I'd get on a plane.
It's like we traveled the world tonight. We move on to item number 9 at this point, which is the 2020 construction preview. And no vote expected of this commission for this item. I will turn it over to Director Spencer to start us off, please.
Well, and I would just come back at you, given the hour. I know you have an executive session coming up for personnel matters. We are happy to share the PowerPoint that we gave to the City Council, and I could answer any questions in the director's report. So maybe in the sense of time that we share our presentation electronically and have any questions in the director's report.
Okay. And that report is referenced in our packet, by the way. So we as commissioners perhaps have that on our computers right now in case any member of the public is interested. I presume this is posted on the website as well, Director Spencer. Is that fair to say?
Rob?
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, Rob.
I'm just double checking right now. I believe it's the presentation should be in the packet.
Right. Okay. So on the packet on the website.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And it's also a version of this presentation is also on the DPW website.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. So then when we're talking the website, we're talking the commission website when we have a packet, but you're saying it's also on the DPW website in solidarity with itself as a PowerPoint that people could download. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Great. I think I looked over the packet, but I guess we can bring it to commissioners at this point. Any commissioner questions about the updates that were contained within the packet that we have? Commissioner Overby, please.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to point out that it's very much been appreciated, the short run repairs for sidewalks. That was a new change recently, and you mentioned it on the sidewalk reconstruction section. And I don't know if you want to just mention the fact that there are quite a few things that are going to be less because of the whole COVID delays. But I just wanted to thank you for the fact that you're doing short run repairs for the sidewalks, because that's really been helpful to people. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. We've gotten a lot of requests from the community, and we've pivoted our approach on sidewalks as a result. And it's mostly our construction team that's going to be doing those short runs this year, as they're a little trickier, and we're focusing the contractors' work on the long runs.
Yeah, thank you for that. One question for you, Director Spencer. Last year, we had some significant construction near the downtown, and it seemed to get delayed due to some circumstances outside of the department's control. Wondering, as we go into this next construction season, if you anticipate anything of a similar nature that may require a little extra effort. I know you can't foresee what might be unexpected, but just thought I'd pitch that question to you. Or Norm, same with you.
I think the Great Streets project that we completed last year on St. Paul Street was a full depth reconstruction that was a much more comprehensive and complex project than what we have on the docket for this year. And we've learned from last year and put certain structures in place to try to reduce the duration and level of impact. And happy to talk through any particular projects with commissioners, but I think we should have projects that are shorter in duration and with less impact. That said, City Hall Park project got started later this season because of COVID, so it will continue through October or early October this year, which is a couple months later than it was expected to be completed.
Thank you. That's actually good to know. I'm sure that question would come up. Norm, I'll pitch the same question to you. Thoughts on the top of your head on that?
Well, St. Paul Street was, a particularly challenging project, in part because obviously we're dealing with undergrounding of utilities. We're coordinating with Champlain College's project, and we encountered soils that we just didn't simply expect, or at least didn't anticipate to that condition. Along with, then we had some services that were aged that people were electing not to repair or replace. And so we had just a whole series of bad events that just protracted the schedule. And our hope is that first of all, we don't have a project of that complexity in the near term, but also I think we've looked at how we bid work and how we package work such that the contractor from beginning to end is responsible for those larger projects, and the smaller projects we can kind of dole out between different contracts. I think one of the biggest challenges we faced is having contractors who can perform and stay in the community as opposed to going to somewhere else, or have proper staffing to be able to kind of pull it off. So we've looked at a number of things. We've tried to do a number of things. So some of those things are not within our control, but we are definitely trying to adapt to that changing condition.
Okay. Thank you for your thoughts. Fellow commissioners, last chance before public comment. Thoughts or questions? Okay. Let's go. I'm going to defer to you, Mr. Goulding. Any hands raised for this section for public comment?
At this time, there are no hands raised and the inbox is clear.
Okay. Thank you for monitoring that. I recognize this extra effort. Okay. So then, since we had no commissioner comments, it looks like we can close that particular item. I'm just doing one last scan to see if anyone's jumping out of their chair and not seeing it. We will close that item. So thank you for the update. I thought the presentation was just wonderfully informative. So if anyone in the public wants to take a few moments to review that, it's very informative. We are moving on to item 10, approval of draft minutes. As this commission will recall, the last time we met was March, and at our March meeting, we had one item, which was a water bond vote. So we have two sets of meeting minutes to approve here. So that would be February's and March's. Let's take these one at a time would be my suggestion, just in case we do have any changes that occur, as happens from time to time. So if we focus first on the March 19th minutes, any thoughts or recommendations for changes on those minutes? I will add one of my own that I spotted in that one under item 10, director's report. I'm going to move that out of there. There's a sentence, it says, it's under case for fraud management in that little section. It continues with, there was an in-kin agreement, and I'm sure it was meant to be in kind. And I just thought that was an important enough typo that we probably ought to flag that. So just correcting that. My other correction would be on item 11. It was Commissioner Overby's comments. Let me just find this real quick here. She inquired about how the sidewalk plows did not do some of the streets during the storm and some of the streets. That sentence, I'm unsure what message is being conveyed. Perhaps it can just be shortened after the first, or I'm sorry, after the word storm. Perhaps it's just an error on that piece there.
Archambault, just a quick question. I don't have kind of unlimited time, so can I get a sort of time check on, because I know we're supposed to go into executive session after this, so I'm just kind of wanted to get a kind of sense of where we are with.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. So we're on approval of draft minutes. By agenda, it allots for 5 minutes. Those are just rough guides. Anyway, I don't suspect this would take more than 5 minutes to get through both Director's report, I do suspect we would spend some time on. 10 is in the agenda, but I suspect I could see us spending about 20. Commissioner communications, it depends on what people have. So if I were to guess, I would say we probably are looking at 40 minutes to bring us to the executive session. Super rough guess. I'm not sure if that helps with your planning.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stick around for all of that, but all right,
Okay.
thanks.
Sure. Any thoughts that you're able to contribute over email? I know I've sent out some informal emails in that sense, and it's really all about evaluations. So
thank you.
Love to include those. Thank you. All right. So again, February minutes, I had my 2 recommendations correct in the item in 10 to turn it from kin to kind. And then the paragraph in the middle there for Commissioner Overby, I would say let's just cut out the second and some of the streets and just put a period after storm. Just really kind of basic maintenance. Commissioner Overby?
Well, I actually was saying that some of the streets were not plowed, not just the sidewalks. I was that was more, it was maybe a little inarticulate, but the intent was not just the sidewalks. So maybe some of the streets weren't plowed, the sidewalk plows. I mean, I was advised that one of the the mailmen were unable to get their vehicle. They got stuck and had to walk home and left it on the street because it wasn't plowed in my neighborhood. So that it was, some of the streets were not plowed as well. So your correction really isn't accurate.
Okay, you're right. That would not be. So what would be a more accurate interpretation of what your comments were at that time?
Let's see, the way it was worded here, I sort of figured that people could figure it out, but.
No, it was very confusing to me.
She part about how the sidewalk plows did not do some of the streets through the storm, and some of the streets also were not plowed.
Okay.
How about that?
So also we're not plowed. That would make better sense then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a comment about something as well. I thought you were working on the March one, but on the item number 4, the consent agenda, there's a comment that I made in response to our decision to remove the 2-hour parking on North Winooski, and the way it was worded here is incorrect. It says that I was asking about 2-hour parking by the Community Health Center on Riverside, and what I really was asking about was the impact of removing the 2-hour parking limitation on North Winooski Avenue, how the Community Health Center employees might actually just take up use of that space.
Okay.
That's what I was asking. I don't know, maybe that wasn't clear when I was saying it, but I basically asked about the impact of removal of the 2-hour parking on North Winooski, on the parking behavior of Community Health Center employees.
Sure.
To take over those spaces that we thought would be available to other people.
What suggestion would you have for language to use to properly?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Thought?
I was saying that Commissioner Overby asked about the impact of the removal of the 2-hour parking limit on North Winooski Avenue, as it might get used by Community Health Center employees. I think it's just something that I was thinking we should watch for. We took away that parking as part of the consent agenda, and I was saying, will there be a consequence to that? But it'll be all taken up by Community Health Center people parking. That was what I was.
Okay.
Did whoever took the dictation on that, did you understand what I said? Or is it obvious?
Okay. Well, there's a lot that they're taking in at the time. So
okay.
I have your comment. So let's make that a third change, because we have a couple already that I'm proposing. The first being the in-kind, that correction there. The second being under piece 11, where we add that it pertains to the streets too. And then this piece here under item 4, what's the best way, Director Spencer, forward, would you say, on this piece? Do you want me to send you the language?
Yes, I think between that and the recording that's happening here, I'm confident that we'll be able to make the appropriate correction.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other suggestions for clarifications? Okay. Seeing none, might we have a motion that takes those into account, those changes? This is for February minutes. Everyone's quiet and muted. And all right, Commissioner Barr, he's raising his hand frantically over there, looking to carry this
I'm
motion.
just trying to help out and spread the love here. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes with the edits as stated.
Okay. Thank you. We have that motion with the edits.
I second that motion with the edits that reflect the edits. The comments that reflect the edits.
Thank you very much. Any question or discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so those minutes pass with those changes. Director Spencer, you and I can share that final language that I had there. We go to the March minutes, and I'm just reviewing. I believe we were all present. 1, 2, 3. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Commissioner Bose was absent for the March meeting then. So Commissioner Bose will abstain from this one. Any comments, changes, suggestions on the March minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll see if there's any freewheelers out there willing to move this one forward.
I'm going to say motion to accept.
Okay.
Seconded.
There were some
Thank you.
underlines in there that were blank that were going to be filled in, I thought, by later, which are just left blank, but I guess we'll just leave them blank at this point. I think
Oh, the bond piece.
the bond piece, there were some items that were there that were like, how much are we paying? And I think that Assistant Director Moir actually gave us some numbers that I guess we didn't, there was no recording of that meeting, so there's probably no way to know what she said.
Director
Yes.
Spencer, please.
We did fill those out. It looks like there was the erroneous version attached. So let's, I'd welcome a delay and we'll get you the proper version. My apologies.
Are we advised to pause on these minutes then until those figures come about, or what's the suggestion? Okay.
I would suggest that the maker of the motion, the seconder, just withdraw their motion, and you can not act on it.
Okay. Go to Commissioner Barr.
I'm fine withdrawing mine.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Gilman. Commissioner Barr?
I'm so good.
Okay, so you're up for withdrawing that motion. All right, we will withdraw the motion for that. I imagine, do we have to move to punt this to another month, or does this just become an agenda item, Director Spencer, that we just take up in a subsequent month?
Yeah, the commission can choose not to act, and we'll just include it in next month's agenda.
Okay, all right, we will revisit it at that time. Thank you for that. And with that, as I flip open to my agenda here, we move on to item 11, which is Director's Report. Director Spencer, you are up.
All right. There's a lot in the written report. I won't touch on that. You had asked me to touch on briefly the City Council's resolution on Monday night regarding the removal of Everyone Loves a Parade mural that is off the Church Street Marketplace on the walkway connecting to the Marketplace Garage. As you may have noticed, the resolution the City Council passed included a reference that DPW may be involved in removing the mural. We have not had substantive conversations with the administration at this point. I am focused on keeping our teams working on billable work in the community, such as sidewalk reconstruction and stormwater projects. My hope is that we can find a way for that mural to be taken down that doesn't significantly impact our team, if at all. And I don't have any more at this point, but we'll work with the administration to figure out how the council's resolution will get carried out.
Okay, thank you for that. There were other items here, of course, and it looks like Director Spencer is deferring to the packet for that. Commissioners have any questions on these or other items, perhaps that the director could speak to? Okay, I want to ask a few questions myself. I know from being locked up for a couple months here, my main question is, what has the DPW been up to? And that was kind of my biggie, but it's sort of a loaded question too. You know, how's the department doing? How are you coping with this thing? How's the last 2 months been for you all? How has it been for staff? Everyone's safe? All of that.
Happy to talk about that. I appreciate the acknowledgement. The team has been remarkable in a number of ways. I will say quickly that water and wastewater teams have operated the plants reliably and 24/7, and just really pleased with how they've continued to serve Burlington through this time. We have adjusted schedules of a number of work groups who've all been flexible. Equipment maintenance to limit the number of people working in one space. We moved to split shifts. For street maintenance, we went to alternating day shifts. They're now transitioning back to all working together. Now that we have a mask policy in place and clear guidance from the governor. You know, we are pleased to start construction. It's great to see normal work getting done and not be losing time during this warm season. And we are discussing at what point can we reopen 645 Pine Street and serve the public through the building. You know, the customer service staff at both Water Department, Water Division, and at Pine Street has been amazing to provide drop-off and pickup service outside the building, working from home to answer phone calls and emails. And our technical services team is entirely working remotely, and we spend far too much time on Zoom. But the amount of work that's getting done remotely during childcare and schooling is really a testament to an amazing staff. So thanks for the opportunity to mention that.
Yeah, thank you for the update. Good to know. Okay, I think I had any questions. I think they've pretty well been answered throughout the span of this agenda here. So that's all I had. I'm just doing one glance around to see if other commissioners had questions in this regard. And it seems that we can move on quickly with that one. Okay. That closes item 11. Item 12 is Commissioner Communications. So let me go around the board, and this time I'll just see what communications you may have. Commissioner Bose, I know you had a time commitment here. No communications. Okay. Commissioner O'Neill, sorry, I caught you just when you were taking a drink.
Okay, two things. One, my iPad is going to die soon, so I'm going to have to hop off and then get on another device. I don't know why it's not charging fast enough. Maybe there's too many heads, but so if I disappear, I should reappear again. My one question is about the shared streets. You know, that I kind of spoke a little bit about earlier. I think it's fantastic. And again, at this very unique moment in time, and having been on some webinars where even Little Burlington, Vermont is mentioned in Smart Growth America about what we're doing during COVID, I would love, and I know it's a lift, and I did email Director Spencer about this, and will follow up how we can get some feedback as we're retooling this public space during this time. I do think it's really important that we can capture as much information as possible, because this isn't going to turn off tomorrow or the next day. And I'd like to see what information we can glean from users, the public, and our kind of economic partners in the city on how they're using the space. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, I will hop up to Commissioner Hogan. Commissioner of Communications, please.
Hey, one thought that just occurred to me was you're asking chart to go about staff and how everyone's doing. Sort of toss the idea of maybe a sort of polling. Dr. Spencer, I don't know if you ever do formal or informal polling of your staff, sort of take the pulse of how everyone's doing. There's certainly technologies out there to facilitate that type of thing, but we could, it could be a sort of an anonymous check-ins quarterly or yearly, wherever, just say, would you recommend working at DPW? Or, do you feel proud to work at DPW? Those types of questions sort of been in the back of my mind for a while, but maybe even more useful to be pinging people and get their see how they're doing in these times. One sort of humorous anecdote, really, we're all excited to see construction restarting. I was out with the kids the other day and noticed some sidewalks closure signs up that they're being under construction. In the sign of the times, when kids asked if it was because perhaps they got germs on the sidewalk, that was why it was being rebuilt. And I was like, no, we're just, they're just working hard to smooth it out. And germs notwithstanding. We do really appreciate the effort of all staff is doing to do their best to keep up in these times. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hogan. How about Commissioner Gilman? Commissioner Communications for you?
Nothing for me.
All set? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Barr?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Peggy's or Commissioner O'Neill's comments about gathering some good data to give us some direction in the future for the streets and use of them, especially during COVID. For the Old East End and Ward 1, I wanted to point out that ecstatic. I know that most of the folks have jumped off the call already from the staff, but ecstatic about the crosswalks being put in. It makes it a lot safer at the head of my street on Colchester Avenue and Chase, getting across. Although traffic is still pretty slim going up and down with COVID, I think it's still not to its full capacity. It does make it feel a lot better. And I've received a lot of comments from folks within Ward 1 and 8 and UVM looking forward to the shared path. I think that's what we're calling it, from East Avenue to Prospect. I think that's going to be starting in the next week or so. I think it was supposed to start this week, but soon. So thank you. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Barr. Commissioner Overby.
I just want to communicate a question from former Commissioner Jared Wood, who has asked me about whether we could be using crosswalks that of the zebra striping, which he considers more visible than the fake red brick. Is that something that we, that was considered, that is not allowed? Or, I wanted to just ask that question because I think I agree with him that zebra striped crosswalks, they may be ugly, but they certainly do stand out more than the worn off red paint with the brick entrance. Is there any legal reason we couldn't use those, or is there a decision, or was there a decision made at some point to standardize on the look that we have for crosswalks?
We have a choice. Norm, do you want to discuss?
Yeah, there's a full range of choices that all need to comply with Federal Highway Standard of Practice. And that I think that could be a standard we would adopt. I think we were trying to match both the fundamental needs of making it visible, but also the aesthetic. And so throughout the city, there's different types of crosswalks, but we tried to limit to really kind of a handful. Most of those are either solid bars that cross the road laterally, left to right, or the actually the pavers with the granite limits and also the striping on the outer edge. So it really is a function of whether or not we want to adopt a different practice as a standard. One of the things that I've tried to do as a city engineer is to really press forward with getting formalized standards of adoption for these types of things. And for the last 4 or 5 years, we've tried to get a consultant to kind of do that work. And we're now, with the COVID crisis, we're financially challenged. And so we are looking to do that work ourselves and focus our staff to that task. So if you have a particular preference for reasons, we should probably discuss that and see how it fits with where we go from here with our standards.
I think it's a matter of researching from my perspective of what's a safer thing. I think his concern is actually Colchester Avenue as well, where it's nearby to where he lives. So, but I don't really know. I just, it sounds like the zebra striping, maybe not so aesthetically pleasing, but is it safer? That's the statistic I would be wondering about.
Yeah, we could look and see if there's research that drives the decision, which provides the highest degree of safety, but we're also mixing that with aesthetics and maintenance.
So Norm's process would be the right one. If you have, or Jared has preferences, communicating with Norm as they develop the engineering standards this year. We're basically doing our best to maintain what we have. We're not able to hire seasonals because of the budget crunch. So there are going to be a lot of crosswalks that are the red brick crosswalks that may get the white lines on either side, but are not going to get the red brick repainted. We're going to be doing the best we can, but it's going to be a tough year.
So it could be a pilot, could be done for a crosswalk on Colchester Avenue just to see what it would look like for.
Well, we've done those in the past. I think that it's a bit of a urban blight, to be honest, and we're trying to blend the aesthetic with the functional need of having people be aware that there's a crosswalk. And frankly, the banded crosswalks with a broader band, I think, is really suitable and adequate. But if people feel that there's a need for a high degree of safety over the aesthetics, then we'll look at that.
Sounds good. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. I just had two items. One was around the road paint, in particular the bike lanes, which have once again just disapparated into thin air over the winter and are in the lake with our salt. I know this is an ongoing challenge. We had a pandemic, so to be realistic, I can understand. But this happens year to year, and just wondering if, number one, where bike lanes might fit in the priority schedule at this point in time. And I want to contribute too that I've read articles about bike sales going through the roof through this pandemic. So I anticipate we will have a lot more bike ridership around the city, especially in these warmer months as we get into that. So Director Spencer, just quick thoughts on that one?
Yeah, we have our contract with our contractor L&D, who will be doing the long line painting. I will get an update for you. I don't have the recent update about when they're coming to town, but I can email you with that update. I know we're trying to get them done as early as possible every year. We've been doing better. This year with COVID threw us a curveball, but I'll get you an update.
I would just say that normally we don't really begin to intensely stripe until past Memorial Day weekend, simply because the streets are a lot of grit. And with where we are with this year's sweeping season, we're certainly behind, but we can get you an update with a schedule of what Nicole's planned or has on queue.
Yeah, certainly got to be flexible this year, with everything going on. I would say if after Memorial Day has been our general target, we need to think about moving that target up, right? There's significant biking time to be had in May. If we have to move up sweeping the streets, again, it's worth considering. I know we get into that risk. We had a late snow this year, so I recognize that. And there's the global warming, and then things are just heating up quicker. I do think after Memorial Day, we're just coming to a time when that feels a little bit late. But again, we're in a pandemic year. This is hardly top priority among everything else to worry about. Last piece was, Chapin, I had emailed you separately, but there's that little building at the bottom of the Route 127 bike path, kind of near what I'll call the old dump. I remember a long time ago with Director Goodkind mentioning that this was a place where I think maybe it helped to off-gas some of the gases that would build up from that dump. Is that still a facility of ours? I've seen it trashed recently and just wanted to see where that thing stands.
It is our facility, and yes, I would be happy to discuss with you. We need to figure out we're collecting the gas periodically from the landfill. We are not using that facility, which had a generator attached to it that was using the methane to generate electricity. That is no longer working. As the landfill's gotten older, it's producing less and less gas. So we need to figure out a plan for that building.
Okay, thank you for that. That's it for me. And that is it for Commissioner Communications. And that closes out item 12. So with that, we move to the last item, which is executive session to discuss evaluations. I need to pick your brain just a tiny bit, Director Spencer, because it's really around the how we approach adjournment. And clearly that is the only piece of business that is remaining beyond the executive session. How shall we handle that here on a remote session?
Sure. We've had advice from the city attorney in the past, because there's no action that needs to be taken afterwards, and because the deliberation is a personnel matter, the commission can adjourn their formal meeting here and then continue to discuss solely the issue of the performance evaluations in the executive session, just as an informal gathering. So the formal meeting can be concluded at this point, and then you all can continue discussing solely the evaluations.
Okay. All right, great. So then let's do that. Then we will adjourn here at this phase, and then although we are adjourning, we commissioners do have that one responsibility. It happens annually. It happens to occur right at the tail end of our pandemic here, or I shouldn't call it the tail end, but of our lockdown. So with that, I will seek a motion to adjourn with the understanding that we will go to executive session thereafter. Any motions?
Motion to
to adjourn.
I saw Commissioner Gilman on that. He had the draw.
Second.
We'll give you the second, Commissioner Barr. Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so we will adjourn and we will move on to executive session, at which point I suppose staff, you will drop off of our call and we commissioners will linger and determine our destiny from there. So
Can I
thank
ask
you
a
very
question?
much.
Will
Please.
the executive session continue to be recorded, or you're taking that off?
Rob, why don't you speak to that?
So I have just stopped the recording. I've enabled a chime that will come on if you hear anybody else come into the meeting or leave, so you'll have some awareness if anybody can get in. But I'll also be locking the webinar, so nobody really can get in. We do have a couple folks still logged in. I'm going to be removing them on the attendee side shortly. Director Spencer, City Engineer Baldwin, myself will drop off this call. So no one will be able to get back in. For full candor, my account, which hosted this, technically could get back in. Of course, I won't do that, but just for awareness, I wanted you to be aware. And I'll be turning the hosting duty over to Chair Archambault. You'll get a notification in a few seconds. And at that point, just be vigilant. If you hear a chime or see anybody pop up on that right-hand vertical toolbar, that means somebody's come in, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Rob and I tested this yesterday just to be sure it worked. It worked great. So knock on wood, it should continue with this form here. Okay, I think, well, we're adjourned, so we can't take up any other business. So Rob, any other pointers?
Chairman, I'm wondering if you can either make me the host again just for 1 second. I do need to take one or two more quick actions to make this smooth for everybody.
Okay. Do I make you a host or a co-host?
What's that?
Do I make you a host or a co-host?
Make me the host, and that should